Before we start, I want to welcome everybody to our October 16th Town Board meeting. Next, I'd like to recognize some special guests tonight. With the members of the Anti-Bullying Committee in attendance, please stand. Yay. And also the Youth Advisory Board, please stand. And Parent Advisors. Yay. And just a reminder that the public hearing on 7B is sworn testimony. That's the automotive repair. At this point in time, I'll call the meeting to order. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And tonight, the invocation will be given by Pastor Jamal Brown from the United Church of Christ. Welcome back, Pastor. And he is a key member of the anti-bullying campaign. Ha-ha.
How y'all doing?
Yay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Pastor.
I won't say good evening because it looks like y'all have a lot of work to do tonight. Just want to give accolades again to the great work of the anti-bullying campaign, and as well as our youth advisory committee. Let's give them another hand clap if we could. Amen. As everyone is here tonight in an act and a spirit of service to serve all of Holly Springs, we thank God for your endeavor. I would like everybody to please bow their head with a quick word of prayer. Our Father and our God, we give you thanks, praise, glory, and honor, for this is the day that you have made. We're going to rejoice and be glad in it. Father, we ask now for your spirit of counsel and guidance as we deal with today's assignment of the town business. Bless, Lord, those who are in leadership to lead with wisdom and justice, and Lord, bless those who are here to express concerns and requests. Bless now, and we give you thanks for your presence in this place. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Item number 4, adjustment approval of the October 16th meeting agenda. Mayor Pro Tem. Where is it? Something?
We're technical, hold on.
Technical problems. That's a first. Never had that before. Wow. Pastor's here, let there be light. How was that?
Now, what is it that you wanted on the screen over here?
Say again?
Are you looking for the the agenda adjustment?
Here it is.
Yep.
That's it, thank you.
Okay, motion to adopt the October 16, 2018 meeting agenda with the following changes. Modify the time of November the 8th council work session to begin at 5 p.m.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously, thank you. And now, and now we're going to go to public comment. And at this point in time, we're going to ask everyone to try to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. First of all, up again, Gerald Holloman. Come on down, Gerald. And we'll wait. Good to see you, Gerald.
I want to first thank you for the pictures. In the middle up there is my good friend, Parrish Wumble, who was on the board when I got elected in 1983
Yeah.
and stayed on the board until I left in, I think, December of 2000 or 2001. I can't remember which. I'm getting old. But he and I visited Washington, D.C. at least 400 times, I think, in the 17 years. He had a van we drove back and forth, and we accomplished a lot. That's the reason most of you are here, to tell you the honest truth. He was very instrumental and that movement to build this town back. And I can never thank him enough. I looked at the 5% tax increase, and the county wants 3.8. I'm 81 years old, I'll be 82 next month. My income don't change. So I'm not gonna get a raise to pay these taxes. So I'm not gonna vote for them. I saw that on a $250,000 home is about $220 a year. On a $400,000 home, I'm looking at $352. I don't live in either one of those. I think mine's a little cheaper than all these. But anyway, I don't think that's a good move for the town right now. And if the county wasn't doing it, I'd think more seriously about it, but I can't choose one over the other. Thank you, and have a good meeting. And
Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Gerald.
Next, Stephanie Embry. Please repeat your name and address for us, please.
Good evening, Mayor Sears and Town Council. My name is Stephanie Embry. I live at 304 Mistwood Hollow Circle in Holly Springs in the Wildwood community. And I'd like to ask everyone who is here from the Wildwood to stand up, please.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Rest assured, only 3 of us will be speaking tonight. We all want to get out of here before midnight.
I don't blame him.
I am here to speak about the Lowe's master plan that is before you this evening, and I'd like to begin by thanking every member of the town council who came out and visited our neighborhood, met with our residents, heard our concerns. We truly appreciate your time, and we believe that we are very close to a solution that will be beneficial for everyone involved. I'd also like to thank town staff for their tireless patience in answering our questions and meeting with us, especially Sean Ryan from Planning and Rachel Jones from Traffic. And finally, I would like to sincerely thank Travis Spicer and Todd from Lowe's for listening to our concerns when they didn't have to. They came out and met with our neighbors. They've had phone calls with us. They've corresponded by email. We feel very fortunate that it is Lowe's that is developing the Vaughn and Spicer properties, and we look forward to having them with as neighbors. As I said, there will be 3 speakers this evening. I'm going to give an overview, and that overview starts with, we support the master plan that is before you this evening. We do still have some concerns that I'm going to run through very quickly, but we believe we are very close to a solution that will just work for everyone. The master plan that has been submitted has a 3rd lane added. We are thrilled about that 3rd lane. We understand that to add that 3rd lane, a waiver will be needed for the setback so that Lowe's can put in that 3rd lane without reducing their parking, and we support that waiver. We are very happy about the 3rd lane that is being added between entrance 3 and entrance 4. As we spoke to all of you when we met with you, one of our main goals is to separate the feel of our neighborhood from the feel of the commercial development, and we feel that can best be served by moving the entrance back, which means for us relocating the mailboxes and either relocating the monument or building a new one. We have great news from the post office about that, but again, a waiver is going to be needed for parking. The next speaker will go into more detail about that, but we are asking that a new monument be built behind entrance 4, a no outlet sign be added, and that the mailbox kiosk be relocated. And finally, we do have some remaining concerns for the homes along Wildwood Farm Way to make sure that there is enough privacy and a buffer for them. And that's not just the homes that are going to be facing the buildings themselves, but that's also further down the Little Moccasin Road easement. We learned today that's not a road, that's an easement. And there are significant concerns. The town is working with us on it. Half that easement is owned by Beazer, half of it is owned by Lowe's. We think there's a solution. We just ask for your support in making sure there's a strong enough buffer for everyone, and also enough of a buffer that for our cabana and pool, people who come to shop at Lowe's aren't watching the kids in the pool in the summer. So thank you again. We really are excited about making this corner of Holly Springs a fantastic destination, both to live and to shop, and we thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next, Chris Thomas. And again, name, address, please.
So my name is Chris Thomas. I'm with 156 Greenhurst Circle in the Wildwood community as well. Continuing on from where Stephanie left off, and specifically on the mail kiosk, we were able to have very productive conversations directly with the USPS growth manager, and after review of our situation, it was agreed, literally within about 5 minutes after our conversation, that given the Lowe's proposal, an alternate location for the kiosk was in the best interest of the parties involved. So, and given also the potential of available sites, they agreed that the pool amenity parking lot was the obvious best choice for the USPS, given their policy mandates on both safety, security, as well as distance efficiency with regard to CBU placement. However, an email discussion with Sean of the town staff uncovered that placement of the CBU at the pool amenity would create an inconsistency with town policy. Our pool amenity requires 30 specific parking spaces, and we currently have 30 spaces without room to construct more, due in essence to peculiar conditions of the property. And also that by utilizing the strict application of policy, the UDO precludes the dual use condition for parking spaces. So in other words, we've got 30 spaces, we need 30 spaces, and since the inclusion of a CBU or the mail kiosk to the parking lot would require 2 spaces, it would become true that we now have only 28 spaces left for the pool amenity, and that becomes the inconsistency with the town policy. So we come before you in part to put forth the consideration of a variance. Currently, our pool amenity is open to our community for approximately 25 to 30% of the year. It's not a community center or a specific gathering area outside of its prescribed function. It's an open-air facility. It does not have a kitchen or conference area. It's a covered common space that realistically is nothing more than a glorified restroom facility. It is and was designed to be a walkable amenity. As nearly this entire room full of witnesses can attest, the parking lot has never seen anything close to full utilization. So finally, the variance that we would intend to seek is extremely limited and would affect roughly 6% of the total utilization of this parking structure. While I don't want to bore the council, it's important to briefly discuss the acceptable considerations of valid variances. And most notably, we must prove that failure to provide this variance, and remember, failure to provide the variance, would create an unnecessary hardship as a direct result of the strict application of this ordinance. And this is true. If we were to seek a new site, we would be required to acquire the site and then install a fresh parking lot. And we already have a parking lot. That B, the unnecessary hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. And it would, as the parking lot is not expandable due to a particular gas easement, the pool building, and the property line. So we cannot expand the parking lot. And then additionally, we must show within the variance that the variance will be consistent with the intent of the ordinance and with its current use. And it is. It's already a parking lot. That it will secure public safety, and it does, as agreed to by USPS. And that it achieves substantial justice, and it does, as it provides a benefit to the entire Wildwood community, not simply a single member or particular members. So we look forward to a continued engagement, and we are certain that through respectful conversation, we will be able to find a responsible solution to the mail kiosk.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, Kevin Russo.
Good evening. Kevin Russo, 408 Wildwood Farm Way. My wife Christina and I moved to Holly Springs just this past May. Striving for a better quality of life for our children, we left our jobs, our family, and our friends in New Jersey and used our life savings to build a dream home in Wildwood. It's the best decision we've ever made. Our home sits on one of the lots in Wildwood that backs up directly to where Lowe's complex is to be constructed. Speaking on behalf of all the families whose homes also share this border, which come next spring will include at least 7 children or grandchildren aged 6 or younger, our concerns are around safety and privacy while using our backyards. While we're extremely grateful that the Planning and Zoning Committee stipulated a fence in addition to the T150 minimum tree line, our major concern is that this minimum number of required trees is still insufficient. Taking into consideration that both buildings will sit roughly 100 feet from the edge of our property and that we will be sitting below ground level of these buildings, young 12-foot trees at the present time will do little to shield our privacy or limit our view of the buildings. Perhaps placing this buffer on a raised berm or requiring these buildings be constructed further away from our residential property line would serve to increase our privacy and salvage the sanctity of our backyards. We do not want to feel as though our backyards are a loading dock or a dumpster area. We're concerned, but ultimately in favor of the proposed greenway in hopes that it will provide additional distance between our yards and the rear of these buildings. However, even with the addition of a fence, without a tall, dense tree buffer and sufficient policing, it still leads to the potential for people loitering behind our homes and peering into our backyards. We as a community would like to request that the mature trees in several locations be preserved wherever possible, which includes the trees behind the homes on Cheval Court and Greenwood Circle, as well as the very few mature trees that sit directly behind 400 and 404 Wildwood Farm Way. Additionally, as Stephanie mentioned, homeowners who live around Little Moccasin Road, which serves as an emergency access road for our community, have significant privacy, safety, and noise concerns and are pleading for fencing and additional tree buffers around the homes that run parallel to this access road. In addition, according to Holly Springs Ordinance, Chapter 12, Article 6, Division 2, Section 12-312, it shall be unlawful to create, cause, or allow the continuance of any unreasonably loud, disturbing noise, particularly during nighttime. We as a community would like assurance that the Lowe's Shopping Center will be held to this, or perhaps even a more restrictive noise ordinance as to prevent disturbances from the loading docks behind our homes during the evenings. To close, I've heard from several people that of all the retailers to be sharing a property line with, Lowe's is one of, if not the best choice. And that is clearly evident from the hard work that they have put into meeting with our community and trying to fit our needs. I am optimistic about the end result of this project. However, I request that you please consider the safety and the privacy of all the children and families that will be sharing the southern border of this property. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
And thank you all for those comments. Appreciate it. At this point in time, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll go to agenda item 6A. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce one of my favorite senators, Tamara Beringer, who is here to give us some very good news, I think, about something going on in grants, as I recall. You're on, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the Town Council, and also the citizens of Holly Springs. I do indeed bring good news. I am very pleased to share with you the news that the North Carolina General Assembly has appropriated $50,000 for a grant and aid to the town of Holly Springs to support the Mayor's Anti-Bullying Program, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Board, and the School Safety Program, and the Teacher Classroom Supply Program. As a person who was actually bullied in middle school mercilessly, I'm particularly excited about this news. All these projects have one thing in common: the health, welfare, and positive development of the youth in Holly Springs. My paramount consideration is school safety. To that end, I recommend that the funds be allocated as follows. First, 30% to the Mayor's Anti-Bullying Program. I personally was a victim of bullying in middle school, so clearly I understand firsthand how devastating bullying is to not only to its victims, but also to the school and community at large. Preventing bullying and any retaliation from its victims can play a very important role in enhancing school safety. The next 30% to the Holly Springs Youth Advisory Board. These young leaders recently embraced the cause of anti-bullying and school safety. This investment will empower these young leaders to take this message to their peers, to develop and nurture positive relationships, and create an environment and culture promoting school safety. I understand that some of these young leaders might be traveling to Washington, D.C. to advocate for school safety and anti-bullying legislation with our federal elected officials. I will also be hosting an advisory day for them at the North Carolina Senate in the spring. Finally, the 40% remaining to be invested directly in and for the benefit of Holly Springs schools for projects and supplies that enhance school safety and a positive, supportive learning environment. I understand that Brian Pittman, principal of Holly Springs High School, has been asked to coordinate this effort with the other school principals in Holly Springs. I want to thank you for your leadership and public service for our mutual constituents, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. It is a great honor and privilege to represent Holly Springs, and I'm very pleased that this grant will be used for such important purposes. You are so well deserving. Thank you.
We're just getting out of the way. No, we're good. You guys go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, dear. All right, come on. Come on. Come on down. Yeah, we'll do it this way.
I tried to catch a check like this a few years back.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Senator.
I just had a couple things I wanted to say. Thank you, Senator, for your generous grant to our schools and our town. On behalf of the citizens, our town board and staff, our anti-bullying program, our youth advisory board, and our schools. And for those of you who might have forgotten this, if it's good for the kids, it's good for Holly Springs, right? So you remember this evening, we have spared no expense to go through our coffers. And we have for you what I wear every day. And I love the color. And the color is fine. It goes well with what you got on. Our anti-bullying campaign bracelet. Thank you. Wear it in good health. I will. And even more importantly, and if you don't want to wear this around everywhere, you can always use it for a nightshirt.
I will hang this in my Senate office. Yes.
Committees against bullying.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Town board, any comments, questions? Sarah? If not, I would ask Dan Berry to maybe make a motion.
Sure. Motion to accept $50,000 from the state of North Carolina and refer it to the Council Civic Agency Grant Committee for disbursement and appropriation.
Second?
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. And thank you again for all that you're here and the people came. Agenda item 6B, request from communications, Wake County South Wake landfill report. John Roberson. Hi again, John.
Hello. Give me just a second to set up.
You certainly may.
Hopefully this goes quickly because I came and practiced earlier today.
We appreciate you coming, John. Thank you.
Billy, may need you. We have an IT guru here.
I got it.
You got it?
We'll see.
Maybe.
It's adjusting. There we go.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
let me
there you go.
Start the
That's
slideshow. So, Mayor, committee, council members, thank you for letting me come today and spend a few minutes. I've been warned by Randy, I have about 10 minutes, and then give you all some time to ask some questions after that. So, because I know you've got a busy meeting, so I'll try to go through this as quickly as possible. So just a couple of quick slides about who Wake County Solid Waste is. We don't just do the landfill, we do a number of other things. You can see a few pictures here, and I'll show those to you a little bit later, of some exciting things that we're doing in the area. Secondly, our services, we work on increasing recycling, reducing litter. We provide disposal locations, of which one is the South Wake landfill that I'll be talking about today. We're attempting to minimize illegal dumping, and we also provide 11 convenience centers that help with minimizing dumping, illegal dumping. We provide multi-material facilities to collect things that are banned from the landfill, such as pallets, electronics, and that sort of thing. And then we also protect the environment by providing HHW, or household hazardous waste facilities, of which there's one nearby. So a little bit about some recent efforts. The first one I'll point out is we're expanding the convenience center here at South Wake, and I've got a drawing, a picture of that I will share. It might take a second to adjust the screen. Here is a recent, amazing what you can do with drones these days. This was done by drone technology. And you can see what it doesn't show is what used to be there, but what used to be there is not a whole lot. The convenience center has been expanded. It's now a 7-bay facility that collects from trash to recycling to metal to C&D construction and demolition debris. We've built a new HHW facility that has a roof over it as opposed to the one that used to be sort of behind some other facilities, and then expanding the multi-material where we take electronics. So that's that facility. The other I will share is one of the other things that we've done recently is our landfill has a total of 74 acres currently. We've just recently finished a closure of 24 of those acres. This picture is a little hard to see, but essentially what appears to be brown in this picture is where the area that's been closed. And that's because this picture was taken back in June. We'd had sort of a dry spell. The grass hadn't come through yet. But about a third of the landfill has now been permanently closed. So let me get back to my slideshow. It'll come up in a second here. There we go. And then the final thing to talk about is some expansion of our landfill gas collection and control system. We now have a total of 66 landfill gas wells at the facility. We have 3 landfill gas blowers. Typically, we're operating 2 of them at a time. 3 gives us the opportunity to exercise them from a maintenance perspective. We are currently extracting about 2,600 standard cubic feet per minute of gas, and that's 24/7. We have one 3,500 cubic foot per minute flare and an energy plant with a 6 megawatt capacity. I didn't include a slide. I had a slide later about what that means. I'll just add one thing. That 6 megawatt capacity means that it's generating enough power from anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 homes, and that power is being used here in Holly Springs. So our South Wake facilities, Phase 1A opened in 2008. That's the blue area. Phase 1A and 1B were then, 1B was opened in 2010, and then those 2 areas were combined. And then in 2015, 2A was opened. We expect that 2B will be under construction in 2021. One of the things that's always of curiosity is how we deal with daily cover. On a daily basis, whenever the landfill is closed every day, we, by permit requirement, have to close it and cover the facility. It's not left open any day of the year. The only exception to that is right now during the state fair. We are receiving deliveries because the state fair cannot take waste, cannot pick up waste during the hours of the state fair. They have to go between midnight and 6 a.m. to pick up that waste, and they deliver that waste to the landfill. And it's incorporated into the next day's waste. So that goes on for about 6 more days, something like that. But by permit requirement, we cover the landfill every day from December through July, and it's important to recognize that timing. We use 3 different methodologies for daily cover. Posi shell, where we're using our recycled paint, industrial tarps, and soil. And then from August to November, when we have our predominant wind direction to the south, we are focused on using soil, with tarps and posi shell being used in a limited fashion. And then one important thing to note is during Hurricane Florence, we were unable, even though we were in that July to August to November timeframe, we were unable to use soil as extensively as we normally would, and that brought about some odor complaints from the 9/18 to the 9/30. Real quickly about odor control efforts. We've had a landfill gas system in place since 2010, effectively 5 years before any permitting requirements required such a system. We've done a number of studies. One of those things that the study did was reducing our working face, which is something that our landfill manager does on a regular basis. And we've evaluated a number of types of odor mitigation technologies. We daily monitor the odor issues. We visited different places looking at other strategies that people put in place, and we've even established an online odor complaint form, and I'll show you some data from that in a minute that I think will be fairly interesting to you. We also have a on-site system that it's in place for dealing with odors. As you can see, and as you've probably seen messages from me over the past year, it's not operated as well as we had hoped. At first, it was having some electrical issues. It got some additional upgrades in June of this year, and it's actually getting ready to leave the site next week for some further upgrades. We think this is the hopefully final major upgrade to the system. We do think this next upgrade will be much more effective than the prior ones, primarily because it will allow them to double the output of the odor neutralizing material. We've talked about this stuff before. There's working face related and landfill gas related potential for odors. The key to that is wind speed and direction are always a contributing factor. As far as odor complaint data, when we started in September of 2016, you can see that's where our data started. And you can see it's amazing how this data reflects the studies we've done before about predominant wind direction, with some minor adjustments that I'll talk about at the end as to what we're going to do with that information. For 2 years now, we have seen limited odor complaints from the months of December through May. And they begin to pick up in June, which is a little bit earlier than that, the data that we had gathered earlier about predominant wind direction. But certainly August through November are when the months that we have our struggles, if you will, from an odor perspective. And that has repeated itself twice, so usually that means there's something going on. I've put those red dots in there, or that red column, to note that it seems to start earlier than August, and so there's some things we're going to do to try to deal with that in the future. One thing that we always want to talk about a little bit is development near the landfill. When we built the facility, there were no neighborhoods within a half a mile of the landfill. Now there are quite a few. And based upon our odor complaints, you know, a vast majority of them are within a half a mile of the landfill. So just a couple of interesting slides. This first slide just shows a aerial map that shows some rings around the landfill that shows different extents, a half a mile buffer, 1 mile, and 2 miles. And you can look at that more carefully. We can certainly share, I've shared this slideshow with the town that it can be distributed later, so you can look at it more carefully. But the one I wanted to share with you next is one where we've superimposed some development information. And you can see the light green being development prior to approval of the landfill. Most all the other colors have been post, or all the other colors have been post approval of the landfill. And you can see there is an area to the east along old Highway 55 that was mostly developed prior to the landfill, but most everything else has been developed since. Let me back up. I was going to share one interesting, how am I doing on time? Give me just another minute here real quickly on this next pretty cool thing that our GIS department has developed. So if you look at this, this is 2005 aerial photography. So it's before the landfill was built and before a lot of these neighborhoods are built. But I can take this little slider and begin to slide across and show 2017 data. And you can see 12 Oaks up here. You can see the landfill start to appear and the shopping center to the south, and Forest Springs. Anyways, pretty cool device. It also shows a lot of development out in this area. But comparing 2005 development with what is now, obviously it shows that Holly Springs has done a lot of growing. Let me get the PowerPoint back up. So, future odor control efforts. We are working, our landfill operator is working on some additional odor systems that are closer to the working face. The system that we bought is located some distance from the working face. The purpose there is so that it could provide some overall odor fighting measures. This is an attempt to get closer to a potential source of the odor. Based upon that odor complaint data I shared with you before, we'll probably make a change to our cover material changes, doing that about 2 months earlier than we have been in the past, starting in June, as opposed to waiting till August. One of the things we're doing in our group is we're going to establish some on-call contractors so that we can react much quicker with installing wells and piping. One of the things we struggled with this past year was we had a plan to build, but having to go through a bidding process and all that kind of thing, it took us an additional 4 to 5 months before we could actually make things happen. We are evaluating some software and monitoring equipment. Actually have a conference call with a company tomorrow called EnviroSuite to help us look at some things that might help us monitor better. And then one of the things we're going to do is establish a capital fund specifically for odor control measures. We don't know what that's going to be spent on right now, but we'll put a fund together that allow us to react quicker for potential odor measures. And that's all I have. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments from the board? There might be a few.
There might be a few.
Go.
Thank you, John, for coming.
Glad to be here.
I was here before the landfill, and now I'm living with it here. And I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that the perception of the impact that the landfill would have on our community and what the reality is are not the same. I mean, people felt like it was going to be here, but it would be, we shouldn't really smell it. It's a lot. And I think some of the issues that we have is folks have given up even letting you know that it smells. They've given up that they think that people will react. So what I'm wondering is, are there other things that you can do? Like the system that was put in September, what I remember, it didn't have backup when the power went out. It wouldn't start. I mean, those are almost common sense things that you would expect when you put in a system that big. Why aren't those being done out of the gate? And it feels reactive to some of the things I know that you guys are trying. So it's better, but a couple things I want to toss out. What if you thought about an app? Because right now, if you made it so an app, so it would be much easier for residents to tell you when they smell the odor, I think you would be amazed that it's a lot more than you see.
Okay.
You're basing it on what people will some people aren't even bothering, because the form, you have to go find it, then you go find the form, and we often have people say, where's the form? If we had an app that said, if you really want real-time data of how this is impacting our community, I think that would go a long way.
Okay, we can look into that. I will say the link is pretty easy. It's through SurveyMonkey, which is something that somebody can put on their phone just like they can anything else. But it's not a specific app.
It's not right, and you have to kind of go look for it. The other thing is, in this day and age, could there not be more sensors? Because it feels like it's reacting, waiting for people to, it's like, could we not have more sensors so things just get triggered and you know to do something?
That's a great question. The way I'll point it out is there doesn't exist in the marketplace a sensor that is reliable for landfill odors. They have them for sanitary sewer because you're measuring H2S. They have them for a number of other things, but for a landfill, because it's such a conglomeration of different potential odors, there is not a device in the market that is reliable at measuring odor from a landfill because the odor is not always consistent. But the positive news is there are companies out there that are working hard on developing that kind of equipment. And that's what my conference call is with EnviroSuite tomorrow, is to understand, they've described within the last 9 months, they've had some significant hurdles that have passed as far as being able to monitor better. What you smell versus what I smell can be very different things. Odor is a very subjective thing compared to a lot of different senses, if you will. And so getting that right type of monitoring device that can balance between someone with a very sensitive nose versus someone that is not is a tough chore. Right now, H2S is really what the industry uses, and it has to be more than just H2S.
So are you saying that you're not putting any monitors until they're reliable, or you can even start now with some that might not be as reliable but would help?
We don't have any odor monitoring system out there at all currently.
Okay.
So we're looking at installing some.
Okay. And the only last thing I have before others have questions, can you tell me a little bit about the rebate program? So for the town to have the dump here, we do not get any benefits from anything that happens with the dump. Is that correct?
It's a landfill, not a dump.
Well, a landfill. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. It's a landfill.
Sorry. That's a soapbox item for
No,
me.
I get it. I get it.
And
My
the-
apologies, but it still smells.
No, understood. The distinction there is a dump is traditionally what people have
Right.
used, and it's not engineered, designed, all that
I
kind of
stand
stuff.
corrected.
So,
Thank you.
the question was.
The
Now
re-
remind me
So
the question.
what are other towns getting as rebates
Yes,
that we're
okay,
not
yes. So
getting any? How much
when
would?
the interlocal agreement was put together in 2004 or 5, is before my time, but in reading the interlocal agreements that were put together, all the cities and towns in Wake County, along with Wake County, got together, and the agreement is that Wake County would provide a facility for all the towns to use, so they don't have to ship their waste out of county. The closest landfill being Sampson County landfill that we could use alternatively. So that's a long transportation. So the county agreed to build the facility if the towns agreed to commit to bringing their waste to the facility. It guaranteed a certain amount of tonnage. To operate a landfill, you need to have a certain amount of tonnage to make it financially feasible. With that, the county agreed in looking at the overall finances of the system that landfills, certainly on a private basis, are very lucrative. In our case, what we do is we take that profit and we share it with all the towns to help cover their costs that they spend on landfill, on collection of trash. And ultimately what happened is, as I understand it, is Holly Springs was invited to be at the table, but Holly Springs was in opposition to the landfill. So at that point, Holly Springs determined not to join the interlocal agreement. So as an example, it's usually based upon the amount of tonnage you bring. City of Raleigh gets a rebate of about $1 million a year, but they're by and far the largest. Most other towns, I guess towns similar size to Holly Springs, are probably in the $50,000 to $80,000 a year in rebate.
John, thanks for coming this evening. One of the things that I was wondering if you could take a look at was being a little bit more proactive when the facility is down. We get calls and complaints from residents not knowing what has happened and what's being done. And talking about an app is a great way on your website.
Right.
I know social media, whenever you send out, I'm on your distribution there.
I think you all are.
But not everybody is on social media.
Understood.
And if we were to have possibly an application that says, okay, the dumps, we're having some issues at the dump, these are the things that we're doing to rectify,
Okay.
it would give the residents, at least, okay, we smell it, what's being done?
Okay.
And if that can be something that you can look at as an option, I think that would be
We developed
helpful.
an app not too long ago for people being able to figure out where to take certain materials. So I think there's certainly some possibilities there. So we'll look into it.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
John, so what are, a lot of the questions we get are, okay, I filled out the form, what's done with that information?
Yeah.
We did see the graph.
Right.
But what else?
That's certainly one use of it. One of the things we continue to tell people when they fill out those forms is, if I got one today that was for the 8th of October. Well, getting one today for the 8th of October really doesn't help me any, except other than it being part of our data. And that's, I would say that's still useful, but it's not as useful. What we can use the data for is particularly if we have a morning where we have 3, 4, 5 complaints come in within a few minutes, that puts us, our landfill manager, and ourselves thinking about what is it that's going on at the site. Is there some equipment that's down? Is there some issue that's occurring? One of the examples is we discovered some blocked pipe earlier this summer, late spring, because we were getting these odor complaints and we didn't know, the site seemed to be operating fine from that standpoint. So that's one use. The other piece to that is if they're occurring over a particular day, it might change how the landfill operator closes that evening. They may decide to use more soil or tarps or something that's a little bit better at masking the odor. And then finally, the other piece to that is we have the ability with these upgrades to the odor system to crank it up as far as its volume of odor neutralizing. So those are things that we can all adjust based upon the data that's coming in.
Thank you.
John, like Councilman O'Brien had said, we're usually the first people to get calls and emails when something smells. So I just wanted to thank you and your staff for your responsiveness in a lot of these things. We fire off a lot of emails late at night, early in the morning, and all of you guys, yourself included, are very good about getting back to us with the facts so we can try and distribute that to our constituents as well. So certainly appreciate your responsiveness and helping us do that.
Glad to.
Yeah, I want to echo what most everybody up here has said is the need for an app.
Okay.
Being at ground zero for the landfill, it seems odor complaint form is probably ineffective at this point, and people are fatigued by it. I know, I'll get a text that somebody says there's a smell out there, but if I want to fill out the form for them because they're a little too lazy or it's inconvenient, but an app, you get real-time data, you get it exactly where they're smelling it, you get it at the moment they're smelling it, and you can correlate that with local weather conditions. It just seems it would be just far more effective. Plus, the two-way communication that those that aren't with the app can be alerted to issues going on, what's being done about those issues, and again, in real time. And I think, as we've learned with the recent storms, communication is extremely important, and especially real-time communication.
Helpful. The one last thing I did want to add, I don't want to cut off questions, is I think most of you have taken a tour of our facility, if not all. So I would encourage anybody in the audience that wants to take a tour of the landfill. It's exciting.
It's impressive. It
actually
really,
is
it's a great tour. I highly recommend it, yes.
So you can go on our website and you
Very
can sign up
surprising.
there.
Yes. There's a lot of committed people who care about what they do, and that shows with your staff.
Thank
for
you.
sure.
One last question. Phase 5, when is the year that you anticipate this facility to close?
Great question. It's one of those questions I try to give a range because waste volume can change on a dime. And we certainly have seen an uptick in amount of waste over the past year or two, beginning to climb at 2% and 3% per year. In fact, I think even actually up around 4% this past year. That combined with the amount of waste that currently leaves the county. We have commercial entities within the county that collect waste from either commercial entities and/or from people that don't live inside a city or town, and they take that waste to their facility, whether it's a Republic or Waste Industries or Waste Management facility. So when that tonnage is going away, we can say our landfill will probably last till 2040. If that waste starts to come here, that reduces that to 2035. So the range I'm giving typically is about 2040 to 2045.
Okay.
But subject to evaluation every year.
John, I'd like to ask you a favor. When you get back, would you get back to us by email on some of the answers to the questions?
Yes.
In-
Particularly
Particularly the app.
the app is the one thing I've heard
Especially
today that I need to do some research on and come back with a solution.
Anything else?
I do have one probably tougher question, but looking into the future, what do you see the odor increasing or decreasing as we grow around the landfill, as the landfill grows taller, and the impact that will have?
It's a good, that's an interesting question. I don't have my crystal ball, but some thoughts I can add to that is we did actually notice when the landfill was higher, at a higher elevation, that our odor complaints were less. So there is some correlation between right now the landfill's at the same elevation as the neighborhoods adjacent to it. So when that wind is blowing, I guess in the past, when it was at a higher section of Phase 1A and 1B, it may be blowing over the neighborhoods. And really, odors are not typically a problem from about 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. It's those early morning time periods when that wind is just blowing in the wrong direction, and the humidity and all that stuff is at a point where it carries. As the day goes by, any odors that are being generated from the landfill are typically not blowing across the way. It's going up, if you will, and mixing with the air, and not becoming an issue. So that's one comment I would make. As we get to Phase 5, obviously it's getting closer to some areas of Holly Springs and further from some other areas. My hope and goal is that we've learned a lot over the past 8 to 10 years and know how to apply some of that better. Some of these things I suggested in here that we're looking at doing, of being able to be more proactive in installing landfill gas wells quicker, and whether it be the things that the landfill can do adjacent to the working face. I think all those things combined can help us in the future and will help us.
Great.
Good?
Thank you, John, for coming. I appreciate it.
All right, no action taken. Thank you, John. Please do get back to us. Appreciate it.
Yes, I will.
Thanks.
Agenda item 6C, request for communication, Holly Springs Skyhawks presentation. Doug Leroy. And a few others.
Always travel in a group.
I hear you.
Good, thank you. How are you?
Thanks.
Thank you. How you doing?
Thanks.
Yep, I got it.
So we're here to present the Parks and Recreation Department with some proceeds on the results of our Wings Over Springs model aviation fly-in that we had over Labor Day weekend. It was a great turnout. We had 66 pilots from all over the state, many from Wake County show up, and pretty much we flew all day in the park. So we've got a short little video just to kind of recap the event, if it's queued up on the YouTube.
It's not.
It's not?
It's not, but I can make it.
You can?
Yes, sir. It's YouTube, you said?
Yes.
Can you help me?
Billy to the rescue.
Did you have the link? You don't? No.
Getting close.
September 5th?
That it?
full-scale flyover this time.
That was
That's
pretty neat.
cool.
That was the Bandits Air Show team
Yeah.
that does the football games. So we'd like to do two presentations tonight. The first presentation will be to the Parks and Recreation Department. We'd like to present them with a check for $1,000, which represents the portion of the proceeds raised for the Parks and Rec Department. So, Carolyn
That would be
Couch.
Adam Hoffman
Adam?
and Carolyn Couch.
Carolyn Couch.
Photo time.
So the second presentation we'd like to do on our event was we also do this as a Meg Smiles Foundation fundraiser, so we'd like to present Jim Wassley with a check for $500.
Excellent.
Nice.
Hang on just-
So if there's any questions?
Question or comment?
Awesome.
How big
Thank-
are some of those
Looking
planes?
great.
They look like 6 feet
Yeah.
long, or, I mean, they look
Yeah, that
big.
Cub is a third scale. So we this year's fly-in, it was our second annual fly-in. Next year's will be September 7th,
Okay.
Labor Day weekend. But we opened it up for all types of models, so it was a good representation of our hobby. And check us out at Hollyfest. We'll be doing Buddy Box flights, so
Yep.
Great.
we'd like all the town council to come by and get some
Absolutely.
airtime with the
Yeah.
Skyhawks,
Sure.
okay?
Yep.
We'll see
That'd
you
be great.
there.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Agenda item 7A, public hearing, annexation A 1806 Turner Drive Pump Station, Town of Holly Springs property, Gina Clapp. In a minute. Don't leave us, Billy.
That's not the right one, no.
There you go.
All right, there we go. Back online. So this evening is the last of a series of annexation petitions that the town has filed to have all of our town-owned parcels annexed into the town limits. And so this is less than 1/10 of an acre. It is a pump station at the southern end of Turner Drive off of Sunset Lake Road. And tonight is just a public hearing to bring this into our corporate limits. As you can see, it is completely surrounded by town limits, so it makes sense for us to have this officially annexed.
Questions or comments to Gina? Nope. Okay, by the way, open and close public hearing because no one signed up. Any further discussion? If not, a motion.
Motion to adopt annexation ordinance A 18-06.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Agenda item 7B, public hearing. This is sworn testimony, 18 SEU 06, 18 DP 06, 18 WAV, 13 HS Complete Auto Service, Matt Beard, and he's going to explain a few things.
Yes, so the applicant has requested that this be, again, continued to the next public hearing date. It had previously been continued from the September 18th, so you would need to reopen public hearing and then continue it if that's what you wanted to do. Of course, you do have the option of hearing the petition tonight and voting on it, but the applicant has requested that it go to the November Town Council meeting.
So what's the pleasure of the board at this point?
I see no reason why not to continue it.
Yeah.
Yeah, continue.
Reopen it.
Okay.
Take a look at November 20th.
Okay, so at this point in time, we're going to reopen a public hearing and then continue it. Is that correct?
Yep.
What you want? Okay. At this point in time, we'll again reopen a public hearing. Again, no one signed up, so we'll continue the public hearing. And someone will make a motion, please.
Motion to continue the public hearing to the November 20th, 2018 council meeting at the request of the applicant.
Second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Public hearing 18 REZ 07 12136 Holly Springs, New Hill Road. Again, Matt.
Okay, so at the last meeting, this application was brought forward. You had made a motion to table the request pending some alterations to the conditions being offered. There was some question regarding use of property under a power line easement. So the applicant has come back and modified their offered conditions. The first 9 conditions remain unchanged. A 10th condition has been added stating the maximum density shall be 2.0 dwelling units per acre net of the power line easement. The applicant is here if you would like to ask questions or hear them present.
Applicant? Question? Yes?
Yep. Want them to present.
Sure.
Okay.
State your name and address, please.
Hey, good evening. John Frazier, FLM Engineering, 8218 Creedmoor Road, Suite 201, Raleigh, 27613. Hey, so at the last meeting, I think we had noted that our traffic generation, our trip generation for the traffic study evaluation was based on 2 dwelling units per acre. We voluntarily offered that as a condition. It hadn't been previously, and there was some concern that that condition hadn't been advertised, so we went back, offered that condition to Mr. Beard, and as he presented up there, and prepared this slide to show that the acreage within the power line easement. I think we'd heard that was a question maybe since the last meeting, and just want to clarify that 2 dwelling units per acre is net of the power easement, so it doesn't include the power easement to hopefully address some of the concerns that were heard. So happy to answer any questions that you may have about that.
Any questions?
I do have a comment. While you're putting these homes in the subdivision, are you taking into account the distance of the homes to the power lines and looking at any EMFs?
We haven't gotten that far with the
Okay.
layout yet to really say for sure. Obviously, the homes and the lots would not be within the easement, but as far as the distances and the layout, that'd be kind of the next step in the process for us.
If we could okay, that'd be great.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, sir. Matt?
Thank you.
Continue on.
And if you have any more questions,
Before we do that, we will open and close the public hearing. Again, no one has signed up. Any further comments or questions of Matt?
I was just asking, Matt, so the original proposal was 26.73 acres, right? But now they're removing the easement, which is like 4 acres. So
Right.
Does that change the number, the total number?
So
that-
the size of the property hasn't changed. It's just what
Right.
they're using to calculate their housing density.
Okay.
So it's still going to be establishing zoning on the area within that power line easement.
Okay.
Planning board was 711.
Yes, I believe so.
Any comments from the planning board? Go on.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's why you're here, sir, I think.
Good evening. So a couple things from the planning board. We had some questions on why the TIA was not triggered and whether our thresholds are too low, because I know, as we know, they're going to expand the property right in front of them, but then to get out to 55, you're not going to have more lanes out there without more development. There were concerns about the evacuation route from the Sharon Harris plant because of how close it is. There was talk about road realignments to straighten out Holly Springs Road and do something all the way to 55. But there were also concerns about the lack of traffic studies and fiscal impacts to the town as far as water and sewage improvements. Any questions?
And the final vote, again, was 7-1?
711?
And 1?
Yes.
Okay, any questions?
Nope.
No, thank you.
We're good, thank you. At this point in time, we'll ask for any further discussion. Anything else, Matt, think of? Okay. At this point in time, we'll consider a motion. Someplace, there it is, one of two.
Motion to accept the statements of compatibility listed in agenda packets as true.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Number 2.
Motion to adopt ordinance 18-REZ-07 to rezone 26.74 acres from PUD Plan Unit Development to R10 CU Conditional Use Residential District with conditions offered by the applicant and listed in the agenda packets.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7D, public hearing, Vision Holly Springs readoption. Gina Clapp is back. And I'd like you to go through every page.
I sure can.
They only weighed a ton. Never mind. I'm only kidding.
So really what we are here for tonight is not the adoption of a new comprehensive plan versus it is a repackaging of our existing comprehensive plan, Vision Holly Springs, as well as the incorporation of several planning documents that have been approved by the town council that have surpassed the information that was in the previously adopted Vision Holly Springs document over the last several years. And then being that this is a comprehensive plan, we're asking for a readoption of it as a full new package. There will be a public hearing and then a motion to actually adopt it through resolution. Back in February at the Town Council's annual winter retreat, we started talking about a new program that all the departments that are involved with land planning in town would like to start a 5-year rotation of plan studies. So every 5 years, we're relooking at all the different elements in the comprehensive plan, from land use and community character, which we're getting ready to embark on, transportation, utilities, infrastructure, natural resources, parks and recreation, and community facilities that include our public safety departments. So this is actually not a planning department project. This repackaging included planning, engineering, parks and recreation, police, fire rescue, information technologies, and economic development, as well as administration. So many departments have been working together the last several years, or excuse me, the last several months to put all of this together. It started with the Southern Area Planning Initiative study and the adoption of the land use plan amendments with that. And since then, we've been working on this repackaging. And so to walk you through really quick what all the changes are, since this is a new repackaging and there's been so many changes since the original adoption of Vision Holly Springs in 2007, the acknowledgements section has been removed as that was talking about the committee that adopted the plan. It is not the same plan that was adopted by the committee, so we took out that component to this document. The mission statement has not changed. The The executive summary has been updated throughout the years in about 3 or 4 times, so this is no difference to previous changes, just updating population and current condition information. In the future land use and community characters section, there was an element that was just future land use and a separate element, community character. They have now been combined, and this is to start creating that document that we are getting ready to embark on a townwide 1-year initiative to update. And so really all that has been done in here was incorporating the changes that were adopted already by the Town Council for the Southern Area Planning Initiative, the new future land use plan map, as well as definitions for the different land use categories. There was also some amendments adopted in regards to historic resources and the new historic resource map. We did some reorganization just in the order that items are within the section to make it a little bit easier to read and a little bit more logical in process. And then we also removed the implementation program. We removed the implementation program from every section, as these were all written originally in 2007, and the majority of those items have been completed or are no longer applicable. And as we start working on the new updates over the next 5 years, we will be creating new implementation programs for each section. And then, of course, we updated all the maps. We also took the Village District Area Plan, and instead of it being an appendix to the comprehensive plan as a whole, it has now been added as an appendix to the future land use and community characters section, and will be incorporated into the discussions and study that we're about ready to embark on. And then we also updated the streetscape master plan, which is our gateway corridor locations, as well as our master street tree plans. The transportation section, what we've done here is this section had not been updated since 2007. However, there was a new comprehensive transportation plan that was adopted a few years ago. So this section has been removed as it was and added an executive summary of the CTP and links you out to the comprehensive transportation plan. Parks and Recreation, this was a modified executive summary to Beyond the Green, and there have been some changes to the different ways that Parks and Rec has been interpreting the plan, and since it was a different document in the actual comprehensive plan book versus in Beyond the Green, we have removed the entire Parks and Rec section as it was and have now incorporated Beyond the Green as the actual Parks and Rec component to the comprehensive plan. And then there's been a minor modification to Beyond the Green to remove the references to Greenway maps and put those to the CTP, as the CTP is now the primary document for Greenway locations that the town is seeking to obtain. And then, of course, community character was merged with future land use. There is a community facilities section, and we worked with police and fire and updated the emergency services component to that, as well as the educational resources subsection. We did remove from this document a map that is an old-fashioned circle wish list map from Wake County Public Schools where they'd like to see future school locations. Those maps updated now every 6 months, and they're not always shared with the municipalities, and so it's impossible for us to keep that map updated, so that's been removed. We've also removed all of the components of the comprehensive plan where Wake County is the primary service provider and Holly Springs does not have any implementation partial or ownership of these items, the library resources, health services, and human services. Information technology section in community facilities has been moved from here into the infrastructure and utilities, as we are starting to use our fiber network as utility as opposed to just town facilities. And then, of course, we moved the implementation program, and we updated the community facilities plan map of future police and fire stations. Infrastructure and utilities. This was updated just to correct some minor modifications and updates to programs over the last few years. We've added some information about the town-wide fiber network, and we removed telecommunications section and recreated it as a private telecommunications regarding private telephone, cable, and other type of service providers. And then natural resources, once again, was just some minor modifications over the last several years with some information. And then the Village District Area Plan was merged with the future land use section. So as you can see, this has not been a new plan. We're just doing some organizing, updating with some current information. And this did go to the planning board for review. And they did recommend approval. I don't know if you would like to hear from Mr. Madoni.
Sure.
The planning board didn't see any issues with this plan. There were, of course, some questions. Why are we doing this now whenever we have this consultant being hired to redo the whole plan? And what differences are between this and the future plan? There's also some concerns about some of the natural resource sections, such as like the height of Harris Lake and the most recent FEMA flood study. And there's some concern with the CGA at New Hill Friendship Road in such high density because it was only 4 miles from the Sharon Harris plant. But other than that, there was no other issues from the planning board.
Confirming 900-900.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, Rick? Good? No.
Thanks.
Sir. Anything else
And
before
any
we
further
open and
questions
close?
for me?
Any other comments, Regina? Questions?
I have some comments.
Sure.
In looking at the plan, Gina, one of the things that I wanted to just comment is before I joined council, I went through all of these plans many times on the site, and I still read these ones as well. One of my comments is that the village plan, that was 2007, I think they talked about 220 people that helped then. The transportation plan has been updated. It was 2011, but it was amended in 2013. The park, the Beyond the Green plan, I believe that's still a 2007 plan. Having this brought together, it feels like, oh, it's updated and there'll be a new date, but really the essence of when the residents last participated was a long time ago. So is there a way to reflect? Because we're making decisions on really plans that are over 10 years old, and yet saying we've just amended this plan to be comprehensive in a new date, it feels like it's not quite what we're doing here. We're repackaging, but really, where do we make a point to say we know we have to work on these and that some of these are really old?
I think part of that is that commitment to the 5-year review schedule that we started discussing at the council retreat in February. And internally, I know we have recognized that this is going to be the process we're going to be working on. You know, if you want some additional text put in here or something, we can work on that and bring it back to you for consideration if you don't feel comfortable adopting it tonight.
I think something that says up front, we know we have work to do. We know that it's been a while since we've had residents participate. I think we're just embarking now on some strategic discussions of what we want. The mission statement might change once we're finished what we're doing. That having even a summary up front, because I would read through the plans and I'd realize on page 25 it says, oh, and in 2006 we'll be building this building. I'd be like, wait, how old is this plan? And that's what I want folks to know up front. This is a work in progress. We know that we've committed as a council to go out and talk to residents, but some of these plans are not 2018. And that is I don't know if there's a summary up front that we could say that, at least to be transparent. I think that would go a long way. I don't know how anybody else thinks, but I
think a lot of the work that went into the plan was necessary to update the links, update the formatting. What confuses me is calling it readoption. Right, we're saying we're readopting this now, then we're going to go off on this process for a year and essentially rewrite in its entirety Section 1, future land use and community character. So I'm just confused at why we call it readoption if we can use this version for that endeavor with the new plan that we're going to, get a consultant in here for the next year. I think we should do that because the formatting's been changed, the text has been changed, a lot of the changes we've made. But I want to be careful. I agree with some of your comments. I want to be careful saying are we readopting this or are we just updating it? I guess that's some kind of on the fence on what exactly the action is. I just have trouble with that readoption when we're going to go off on this process and change the whole thing again.
Right. It's like it's a merge and some updates, but really the essence of what started these plans has not changed. And that's the part I'm worried that people think this is where we are. A summary up front or some sort of declaration, I think, I don't know, I'm thinking right here, but There
So
could be a
in
better
the-
approach, but.
Correct. In the executive summary, the very last paragraph talks about the 2018 update. And we don't have a date reference in here to the original adoption date to Beyond the Green. But it does acknowledge in here that the Comprehensive Transportation Plan was adopted in 2011. We don't have the Beyond the Green date. Those are the only two documents that we're bringing into this repackaging.
But the village plan itself that you're merging into is also dated, right? I mean, that.
And that was last updated, I think, in 2014. There's some older components to it. There's been a variety of different things that have been added to it
Right.
over the years.
And that, even that
Evaluated.
plan, it was updates to certain sections, but the heart of how these plans
Right.
started has not been readdressed since probably 2007 for the most part, except for, I mean, I think it's just saying that this is what we got, but we got a lot of work to do, and we're committed to doing something. I think if we say that up front, that will go a long way, instead of reading through page 30 and then being frustrated to say, wait, how old is this plan? That's all I'd like to avoid.
Are we saying continue to update versus readopting? Is that part of the answer or not?
If that's an answer, I think for me, that's the answer I'm kind of looking for, right? I mean, is a comprehensive plan amendment the only action we have to say this is an updated version of the document we need in order to go off on our planning expedition in the next year? If so, then we're faced with this decision. But if not, if we can call it an updated version, but not necessarily re-adopt it as an amended plan, I think that, for me, clarifies a lot of the uncertainty with what it is.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I don't know if everybody else is. Does that make sense? So the motion, instead of saying readoption, would be continue to update? Yes?
Resolution, updating the vision.
Or a better idea?
I mean, we just need to let people know that this is an update. It's not the final for
Right.
the next 5, 10, 15 years. There's a lot of changes coming.
Well, before we do that, let me technically open and close the public hearing. Again, no one signed up, so let's go back to the wording on the motion that makes everybody comfortable.
What you need to focus on is actually the wording of your resolution that you would adopt.
Okay.
And that's the very last page, so I'm getting there.
So you could replace readoption with an interim update, a motion, so instead of the plan is being presented for readoption, plan is being presented for an interim update, and just leave it at that, and that lets everybody know that something new's coming.
With the appropriate changes to the resolution.
Yeah, it'd be the third whereas we could update with that verbiage.
Right.
The third whereas?
And so right now, the third whereas is whereas an updated 2018 plan is being presented for readoption to replace the prior plan in its entirety. We can include, has been repackaged to prepare for updating, or we can, whatever that terminology that you would like to use.
We call it an interim update.
Yeah.
And perhaps the preamble on the website to that link would include some of the things I was talking about, that we know that some of the essence of this, the bones of this needs to be revisited, and that's what we're doing. So explain that up front, just to set the expectation. I think that would be, Randy, I don't know if that's something we could do.
Yeah, we'll be working on posting and creating a new web page for the plan this week, so we can definitely include some language in that landing page.
So want to tackle that? Motion?
Go ahead, you go.
Motion to adopt an amended resolution 1841 approving an interim update to the Vision Holly Springs Comprehensive Plan.
Second?
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you,
Thanks for all the
Gina.
hard work.
Thank you.
This is, I mean, it's a lot of work. I appreciate
Huge.
that. Yes, no doubt.
And heavy.
Oh, I know. I was thinking, like, when you
We're still turning. Agenda item 7E, public hearing, 18 REZ08, 1720, 1740, and 1825 Ralph Stevens Road, Matt Beard and Rachel Jones. Hi again, Matt.
All right. Reset my desk here. So the next proposal in front of you this evening is for a rezoning to take a currently R20 residential set of properties to RMF 8 CU, which is a conditional use multifamily residential district. We are asking that you consider the request, hold a public hearing, and then make a motion to approve, deny, or table. The properties in question include the Agnes Smith Revocable Living Trust owned property, which spans Ralph Stevens Road, both north and south side, the Kesselring property, and the Tollefson property. This has been included as there was some discussion during the planning board about the future prospects, just to be clear that Stevens property is not part of this rezoning. So as stated, the rezoning request is 37.22 acres, property at 1720, 1740, and 1825 Ralph Stevens Road from R20 to RMF 8 CU, conditional use multifamily residential. Current zoning, as shown on the plan, is R20. The property kind of in the middle is RMF 15, that is the Stevens property. And then to the north and west are commercial zone properties. To the south is the Autumn Park subdivision. The recently updated comprehensive plan shows the properties designated as transitional residential, allowing for 2.6 to 6 units per acre. If you have any questions for Rachel, we can have her come up.
Any questions, Rachel?
She going to discuss the roads?
Yeah.
Some of the widening and...
She can.
Okay. Questions, Rachel?
All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. I can walk through the presentation, or we can do specific
That's fine.
questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So with the rezoning, the applicant will be required to provide public utilities to the project site, and that would occur with development. Any additional utility studies are typically identified at the time of development. I would like to point out that the applicant has submitted a downstream sewer evaluation and hydraulic water system analysis report into our review process at this time. Part of the rezoning is for the applicant to commit to adhering to all environmental and stormwater requirements and ordinances with development. And moving on to transportation. So with the rezoning, the applicant is committing to improve adjacent public streets to current standards according to NCDOT standards and the town standard requirements and ordinances. Part of that included a traffic impact analysis that was completed and approved with the rezoning. And the improvements that were recommended within that TIA will be included with the development plan. Part of that includes widening along Ralph Stevens Road across the property frontages. And as you may have seen in the previous slide that Matt had up here, I'm just going to go back here. So as you can see, they have property frontage on either side of Ralph Stevens here, and here the Kesserling property. So there'll be widening required across all of the frontages shown here with the rezoning to meet the ultimate cross-section per our comprehensive transportation plan and engineering, design, and construction standards. And I would like to note that part of the conditions the applicant has offered is to delay the certificate of occupancy issued for new development until phase 1 of Avent Ferry Road improvements is completed. And they've called that out here in this light blue color. This is a figure from the traffic impact analysis, and that's just highlighting what is planned from the bypass to Ralph Stevens Road as part of that funded project.
Are there questions or comments? Rachel?
Just for clarity on parcels that are
under petition to be rezoned, the road widening is required on Ralph Stevens Road. The center parcel of the Stevens property is already zoned, so is that, there's no requirement on that property to widen the frontage?
That requirement comes along with the development plan, so it will be
Okay.
required to be widened.
And what is our CTP for Ralph Stevens Road? Is it 4-lane median divided, or?
Yes, sir.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of, on the Kessler Lane parcel, a couple of sections that are up against kind of Piney Grove and Ralph Stevens. Is that not part of the rezoning, and so the TIA will not account for any kind of improvements in front of those?
That's correct.
Slivers on either end, though.
Other questions or comments? Rachel?
Good.
No? Thank you, Rachel. Do we want to hear from the planning board for any reason?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Planning board, again.
So there you go.
So the planning board approved it 8-1, but obviously we had some issues, nothing that we didn't require approval, but we still had some issues where we had some questions about information from the staff requiring TIA scope and timing of the approved flyover near UNC Rex Hospital project. As you'll see in our motion later, that was important to us. At the time, NCDOT said that we did not need that at this time. There's also concerns with, obviously, when you widen the area in front of the development, then you're going to have other areas that aren't widened. So how do we get the rest of Ralph Stevens Road widened? I know that's a common thing we see everywhere. We talked about it earlier on Holly Springs Road for the other development. There's questions on access to utilities, and most of that will be taken care of in the development plan. As you know, there's no parks on the west side of 55, so everyone is always looking to see what we can do out there. So we had asked if there could be part of the property dedicated to a public park. And while open space is required, it's maybe just for the residences. It may not be for the public. So as you'll see from our motion later, our second motion was the town council consider this rezoning and recent Rex Hospital, the need for expediting the flyovers for Avon Ferry Road, as well as Park and Recreation's review of greenway connections over Main Street to provide access to Womble Park. And this just kind of goes back with, if we don't have a park on the west side, is there a way to get to Womble Park, which would be the closest park in the area? Any questions?
Help me understand the flyover concept. What are we talking about?
Yeah, the flyover is where I believe Main Street is going to go over top of 55.
Oh,
with
like the great
future
separate
development.
interchange
Yeah,
there?
as you saw whenever we had the Rex development plan, I guess last meeting or 2 meetings ago. That was the future plan. They had it in there on their drawings, but there's nothing approved for that yet with NCDOT. So we wanted to see if there was some way we could expedite it or request NCDOT to move forward with something like that.
Okay.
Just to help with the traffic issues and the access across 55, because you can't walk across 55. There's really no way to get across.
I think your motion referenced Avon Ferry, but I don't think our plan calls for grade separation there. Is that right?
The grade separated is at South
At Main.
and Ralph Stevens.
Okay.
On the
Yeah.
comprehensive
Okay.
transportation plan.
Yeah, you say that, Avon Ferry, correct. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else for Rick?
Nope.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. This going on time, I'm going to sneak in the open and close the public hearing. Again, no one signed up. Further discussion and/or questions of Matt?
So one thing I did want to add, that since the planning board meeting, I met with Capital Area Preservation to tour a home on the south portion of the Smith parcel. The home showed up on the Wake Historic Property Survey, or potentially Historic Property Survey. It is from 1967, which means it is over 50 years old and has the potential for historic designation. I included the report from CAP in your packets. If you have any questions, I'm going to try my best to answer them.
Has the developer indicated they would reuse any of that material or provide it to CAP for reuse?
We haven't had any commitments. There haven't been any conditions that offered or anything. we had the first submittal of the development petition that did not show it, but again, that's a separate petition from this. They could pull that tomorrow and come in with something else, so. But they are here if you would like to talk to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would.
At least for the
Yeah.
rezoning.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
Come up, sir, and again, introduce yourself and your address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant team, 421 Fayetteville Street, Suite 530, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27606. Here with me is Chris Simmering of Mungo Homes. They're the proposed builder of the site. Also here with me is Nick Antrelli of Withers and Ravenel, who's done land planning and engineering associated with really the development plan that goes into this, but also helping us understand what needs to go into the zoning. And then finally, Reinhold Stevenson with Ramey Kemp and Associates is here to answer any questions you all might have with respect to traffic. Before I hop into the capital area preservation, I just wanted to highlight 3 points, if that's okay, associated with the rezoning. The first is we are well aware of the significant work that you all put in, that the staff put in, and as well as the planning board in reconsidering overall development within this portion of the town. The Southern Area Planning Initiative is something that was ongoing when our team first approached the town with respect to what could be developed on this site. And so we kind of hit pause. We actively watched and reviewed those meetings and discussions and felt like we came out of that with a pretty good understanding of what council was looking for. And we're hopeful that you'll agree that what is before you tonight checks a lot of those boxes. Certainly from an overall development intensity, it's kind of right there in the middle, almost right there in the middle between 2 and 6 dwelling units per acre. We think it's appropriately located adjacent to the shopping and services to the north. And also would add that we're extending a greenway through our site, if I can. There's a greenway connection that's going to be coming up from the sidewalk here and will ultimately come in and provide greenway connection into the shopping area. So we think it'll provide some walkable opportunities for the future residents in this area while also extending down to the south and potentially picking up some residents from that location as well. Second point I want to make is we do have conditions that you all have seen in other cases related to architecture. Those are taken from you all's development options program, and that's something that is included. I think it's conditions 3 through 6 in your staff report. And then the third point I want to make is with respect to transportation. We understand that transportation in every case is very important, especially in this area. Again, we think this is appropriately located given its proximity to the Avent Ferry widening, proximity to the bypass, and then proximity to the services to the north. But as was mentioned in the staff report, there are two, we think, critical conditions associated with overall development of this project that hopefully give assurances that as this property develops, there will be transportation infrastructure to support the traffic that's being generated by it. The first is there was a TIA conducted, and all of the recommendations included in that TIA have been incorporated into our zoning as conditions. And second, and most importantly, is the Avent Ferry Road widening that is highlighted on the screen. This is actually an exhibit that the town shared with us, that this widening project will be completed along Avent Ferry Road before any COs are issued for our site. And so we're hopeful that you all will agree that this is a plan that fits neatly within what you all have talked about as you went through the Southern Area Planning Initiative, and we would respectfully request you all support. With respect to capital area preservation, we got that report kind of late in the game. It's a meeting that's just happened. We're happy to sit down with capital area preservation, understand what they think is historically significant or not. We don't have any designs on keeping the house necessarily on the site. We haven't ruled it out, but it's not something right now that we've baked into our development plans. Again, we had generated those development plans before that capital area preservation, but we're happy to continue the conversation with them. And if this zoning case is successful, you'll see the development plan, obviously, as it moves through the process. It has been submitted. It's not a part of the zoning case, of course, but it will be something that comes back to this council. And so with that, our team is here to answer any questions you all have, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Further questions or comments?
I have a couple for you and then some for your transportation engineer. If I recall our TRC meeting a couple months ago that we had, there were 4 things, at least that I walked away from that meeting with, as far as maybe would be nice to see. We got 2 of them in here, so that's great, and thank you guys for taking those 2 things into consideration. The 2 that I don't see, and one we discussed, was about a mixed-use concept. I think at the original submission that came to the TRC, there was discussion, and even in your packet, I think there was some representation of a mixed-use component to this project. I'm not seeing that in the request for zoning at this point, so I just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, and that was something that when we first started on this project, this was an area that actually called for a combination of residential and commercial. And so we had mixed use on the south side of Stevens Road, kind of in this location here. We ended up abandoning the plan to do that when the Southern Area Planning Initiative got approved, designating all of this property for transitional residential. And so essentially when we started the process, they called for mixed use, and so we had planned on accommodating that, but the plans that you all recently adopted called for all of this property to be residential, so that's why we didn't move forward with the mixed use.
And the second question on your conditional use statement for 4.5 units per acre, I understand that's on the parcels that you're petitioning for, not the Stevens parcel. I did some quick math, so I guess we're getting to the 4.5 by averaging out the 3 that you're rezoning, seeing that the Smith parcel is front-loaded with most of your density there, and then on average we get to the 4.5. How does the Stevens property play into this? You know, is at an RMF 15 already zoned?
Right.
There could be a significant amount of more homes over and above the 4.5 that you're agreeing to on these 3 parcels.
Yep.
So with that donut hole in the middle, and again, recalling the TRC conversation, there was discussion about a developer agreement or something to get that property into some sort of package where we could have the 4.5 or whatever density you were looking at.
Yep.
You know, I've followed this through the process. I know we haven't got there to this point, but any response from the applicant on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that, you know, in an ideal world, we would have liked to have been able to convince that property owner to submit a zoning petition that is consistent with the development plan that's been submitted. The development plan that's been submitted covers not only the zoning parcels, but also the Stevens parcel in the middle. And it contemplates far less than 15 units to the acre being developed on the Stevens. Now, you can't rely on that. You know, I mean, if that zoning development plan goes away, you have to rely on the fact that what we are showing you is what we're willing to do. I will tell you the only project that my client's going to move forward through the process with includes the Stevens parcel. And we believe that, you know, even though we weren't able to convince that owner to join into the zoning petition, you know, that the overall project is consistent with what you all are looking for from a long-term standpoint. So the best way I can answer it is, we tried. We would have liked to have had them as part of the zoning petition. We understand it would have made you all's analysis of kind of overall development of this area. It would have been easier to understand, but we're hopeful that you'll agree that what you're looking at is consistent with what you've approved, and you'll see the development plan soon enough, you know, within the next month or so, or next 2 months, the development plan will come back to you, and you'll see that it's far less than 15 units a acre on that Stevens tract. That's the best answer I got for you,
Yeah,
Mr.
thanks.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Have you met with any of the council people before?
No, ma'am.
Because that's what this is a lot of information, and I almost feel like I need a little bit more time to absorb what you're proposing and what the impact will be in the neighboring neighborhoods and the vision of how this fits into our area. Am I the only one that feels that?
Jason, I have a question. You said that you would wait until Avon Ferry is completed, correct?
Before COs would be issued, yes, sir.
Okay. Kendra, can you give an update on when that might be happening? Are there any delays? Are we looking at maybe 2020?
So this portion is, we're waiting on construction authorization from DOT, and we will be advertising this in the spring. And the construction duration is probably
2020.
So within 2019, you know, this project, this portion of Avon Ferry, and that's from the bypass to Piney Grove, would be completed.
So mid-2019? It sounds like it's 2020.
The end of 2019.
Oh, the end of 2019.
2019.
Okay.
End of.
All right.
Other comments or questions?
Can you talk more about, well, it's a pretty high-density project up against some commercial. Can you describe the walkability and the pedestrian-friendly aspect of this so that I think our future land use plan envisions that there's a lot of connectivity and walkability to services nearby.
Yep.
But it seems like we have one small greenway up in the left corner, but a pretty sizable property that, when I look at it, seems like people would have to drive out to get to these extremely
Understood.
nearby.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, just given the way that shopping center is built, the access that makes sense is in this location here. I mean, this is essentially the back of, I think it's Harris Teeter. And so there isn't an opportunity for us to provide a meaningful vehicular connection in this location here. Our development plan, and again, I would have liked to have been standing here to talking about all of it, but we weren't able to negotiate that. Our development plan that you'll see in 2 months that's been submitted to the town shows a vehicular connection through this Stevens parcel. So there will be, for our overall project, there will be a vehicular connection as well as the pedestrian connection that's shown on this portion of the site. And so, I mean, I highlighted that Greenway connection as part of the pedestrian connectivity because it's the portion that's actually on the parcels that are before you tonight. The bulk of the connectivity that will be provided from this site to the commercial services is located on a portion of the site that's not part of the zoning case, unfortunately. And that's just given the way that it's built out and where those connections are, it's really where that vehicular connection needs to go.
And the property south of, I guess it's south or like west of Piney Grove Wilbon, how do you expect that to connect pedestrian-wise to the rest of properties heading more towards the
I'm not sure if
the
I've-
Kesserling parcel?
In this direction here?
Yeah.
How will they connect in?
Yeah, pedestrian-wise.
Oh, I mean, the community will have we'll have sidewalks on both sides of the road. I mean, there will be sidewalks provided for the benefit of the residents of the overall community. And there obviously will be vehicular driveways and streets in the middle of the site to provide connections.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the town isn't showing any sort of collector street or anything along those lines through the middle of the site,
Right.
providing connection, but there will be a vehicular connection that will move from this portion here and ultimately will come out to Ralph Stevens Road that will provide opportunities for folks who live on the south side of Ralph Stevens to avoid getting out onto Avon Ferry Road.
I think for me personally, it's more about walkability, not so much getting in your car and being able to get out and go somewhere.
Yep.
This level of density in this location, the intent, as I see things with the future land use, is walkability, pedestrian friendly,
Sure.
bikeability, and having that kind of routes from all parts of these parcels to achieve that.
Yeah, and the development plan, I think, will give you a much better opportunity to weigh how those connections are occurring. Again, we're going to be consistent with the town's ordinances that require sidewalks on both sides of the road, and there will be a interconnected grid of streets through the middle of the community. But I think those are great questions, but those are questions that are easier for us to answer as part of the development plan process because that's where you'll see the guts of what's happening.
Especially with, the school, our academic corridor right there, and putting in this high density, having that walkability is important.
Yeah, and make no mistake, it's important to the developers too. I mean, the builder wants to provide, a community that's going to be attractive to buyers in this market right now, and buyers are looking for those opportunities. That's why they were pleased to be able to provide that interconnectivity, not only with the Greenway, but also the vehicular connection. It just makes people's lives easier, and that's what folks are looking for.
To summarize, the TIA only required frontage widening, or was there any downstream?
I'm going to hand that off to people capable of answering those questions.
Good evening. Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp. Ramey Kemp and Associates, 5808 Farrington Place in Raleigh. And the traffic study is essentially, as you've heard, there's going to be a lot of widening along Ralph Stevens Road. That widening will include turn lanes on Ralph Stevens Road at the access points to allow vehicles to get in and out without disrupting through traffic on Ralph Stevens Road. As you also have heard, the project on Avent Ferry, the Avent Ferry Road widening will provide the additional capacity along that road and for the intersection. And so there's really, the frontage widening as well as turn lanes that'll be provided in and out of the driveways were really the primary improvements that came out of the traffic study.
Did that traffic study include the Honeycutt subdivision?
It did. We had, I believe it was Collins Park, Honeycutt Farms, and I think maybe Southern Crossroads were the three other developments that we had that we used in the traffic study.
On the widening, the two parcels that are on the Kesserling parcel, but not part of the package here, is there widening in front of those at all, or are they offset from Ralph Stevens Road?
There would not be widening there, is my understanding.
Because it's off-site or because the parcels don't front the road?
Yeah, I think it doesn't, the parcels aren't on the road, but I think what's important to kind of point out about that is the widening that will be done, it's going to be difficult until the entire road is widened all the way through, to the 4 lanes. It's going to be hard you're not going to get a lot of extra throughput capacity, with the widening. The widening that'll be done will certainly allow for accommodating turn lanes at the driveways, and there'll be probably some extra pavement there that, will not fully be utilized until the entire roadway is widened. If that makes sense.
So the plan is to leave an hourglass-shaped road then from the beginning. We'll go 4 lanes down to 2, and then, at least on one side out to the Main Street extension.
It'll be hourglass, although it won't really feel that way to the driver. It may look that way, but the driver, will be driving in lanes that are pretty straight all the way through, but there'll just be some extra pavement on the outside.
And your professional opinion is that widening that whole stretch would not add, or at least in front of those 2 properties, would not add any extra throughput or traffic movement? Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. Yeah, until it connects all the way through. You're going to be able to use the pavement. It's just not going to provide that, that extra capacity that you would get from a 4-lane median divided road until it connects, all the way through. So,
what were your trip generation counts with this development?
The trip generation, I think, was 1,700 trips a day, and I believe it was about 160 total in the peak hour, and I think roughly 100 of those would be coming or going, depending on the peak hour.
And your background assumption?
The background assumption was 6% growth per year, in addition to the developments I mentioned earlier.
Okay, got it.
Yes, sir.
You know what the current counts were on that roadway?
I'm sorry?
Current traffic counts on that roadway?
When were they taken, or what were they, or were they done?
Both.
Yeah,
somewhere along the lines of
they were done. Yeah, they were done. Updated traffic counts were done. I believe it was in March of this year when we first started the process, and then the schools were in session. It was a typical day. Counts were taken during the morning and afternoon rush hours or peak hours for traffic. So it does represent sort of the worst case condition out there. And then we added the 6% growth on top of that per year, and then also the other development traffic in the area.
So right now, you don't have any plans to do any kind of off-site road widening to help alleviate our concerns with that, I guess what we call an hourglass. The road widening on Avon Ferry Road is going to be great to help with what we have now. And then, we're going to throw a higher density development on there. It's worrisome to me if we don't have Ralph Stevens developed and widened all the way.
Well, I will point out that more than half of the traffic is going to go up to Avent Ferry. We do have driveways on both sides of the road, so, you'll have some folks turning left to go up to Avent Ferry, some turning right. So it really spreads the traffic, out so that the site traffic or development traffic is not all being loaded up from one driveway onto Ralph Stevens or, turning into one driveway on Ralph Stevens. So it is spread out. And there's also obviously the remaining traffic we anticipate would go down towards Main Street or Ralph Stevens to access other shopping or NC 55 bypass. So the traffic can spread out there given its location.
Am I missing something? You had said the traffic counts would be 160 per day, roughly?
Well, it was 1,700 trips per day from this. Now, let me back up just for a second. So the traffic study made an assumption that there would be a certain number of units built. That is likely to, it would be along the plan that Jason mentioned earlier that would include the Stevens property. So we had 299 units that we looked at traffic potential for. So it's not just the property that we're talking about being rezoned now. It does include the Stevens as well. So we kind of figured we need to look at the whole, of that and what the traffic impacts may be. So that's what that is based on. Yeah, and we had some commercial property. So it was 17. I can give you the exact number, but 1,700 trips, 1,750 trips per day. And then in the morning rush hour, there were 132 trips in the heaviest hour, 1 hour in the morning, so about 2 trips per minute. And then in the afternoon, there were 155 trips in the heaviest 1 hour in the afternoon.
And this is from the development that you're proposing today. This is the count that you're getting for these pieces of property here.
Correct, and that does include the Stevens piece as well.
It seems kind of low. I don't, 2 cars per family, it seems low.
This being a multifamily or townhome type units, those generate fewer trips than a single family home. A single family home will generate about 10 trips per day, and a townhome is around 7 to 7.5 trips per day. And generally with townhomes, you do have obviously some single occupant units. There's usually generally fewer children and that kind of thing. So the trips are just less or lower than if it were single family.
Yeah, about 250 homes, 7 trips per home, about 1,700. Well, that'd be 307. Yeah, about, but in the range. I understand that. I think. I think some of the issues, well, let me ask this, Kendra, the TIA, does that change at all as things come into focus in terms of number of units, in terms of where these units are located, the cross-traffic between properties?
So I think what you're asking, so we require TIAs to be completed prior to rezoning because we wanted that information up front. Knowing that through the development plan process, the number of assumed units may change some. What we tell the consultants or require is that they model the worst case, say, density. If through the design, development plan, if those units were reduced to a point where it could change something, in this case, I would not imagine, if it goes down, I would say we're keeping these requirements the way they are. But I think that'll come into play more when we do the non-residential TIAs and they make large assumptions that then kind of get morphed in the development plan. We might see revised TIAs coming in, but for this one, if they're plus or minus a certain amount of units, you can speak to, you know, whether that would warrant going back into the TIA, but I think what we approved tonight, those are the improvements that they have to do. Now, if they came in with higher density, which they couldn't do because that would not be part of the zoning, that's when we would come back with a revised TIA. But I think tonight, what you approve, that's what you'll see on the development plan.
Other questions or comments?
I was just wondering if you had any comments on the planning board asking about parks or dedicating land for a local park.
Yeah, and the way we responded to that was our development plan contemplates a fairly sizable open space area that's going to be usable for the residents in this area. The town doesn't have an adopted plan with respect to a public park in this area, and so we haven't, you know, worked into our plans. Certainly not dedicating any public park, but we're absolutely, you know, providing open space for the benefit of the residents that will be living here.
Do you have examples of what communities that you've built that will look like what you're proposing here? Because I haven't seen, I mean, I would love to see the vision.
Sure. Question for you. Yeah, nothing comes to mind.
So roughly, it's about 300 homes you're looking at?
The total number of units?
About 300?
292.
Okay.
Yep.
292.
And that includes Stevens. I mean, our overall development plan contemplates 292 homes. That includes Stevens.
Yeah.
Okay. My concern is that that's a lot in that little in that concentrated area there, and, you know, I'm just concerned that the roads can support as well, not only that subdivision, but the subdivisions that are in that area. And with the growth, we got a Sheets coming in, we got a lot of moving parts happening on Avon Ferry there. It's a concern. We got, you know, the schools there, kids coming and going to Sheets. And Councilman Vilton made a good point, is the walkability to all of the shops down in that area there. Because if we can eliminate them getting in their cars, right? That'll eliminate the traffic on the road and having that. So I don't see that. And I know you had mentioned to me that you were going to, you know, have that proposal when you complete the design, but we have to make a decision that we see that now, I guess. So that's where I am with this project.
So if I could respond just to one thing, Councilman O'Brien, just so you're aware, the Stevens parcel, as currently entitled at RMF 15, which is what it's currently zoned, could be built for 262 units. So that parcel alone could be built today pursuant to the town's, you know, existing zoning for 262 units. And so, again, I know it's not part of this process, but to help you all understand kind of what the net increase is, I mean, we're adding a whole bunch of land, and we're adding a total of 37 units to the overall development plan. I mean, we think in the long term, you know, related to your concerns associated with infrastructure, that the benefit of being able to handle the project in this fashion is that you're pulling a lot of existing density off of a site that our development plan shows far less density on, and you have a cohesive development coming forward all at once. You know, it's not developing piecemeal. So I just wanted you to be aware that just the Stevens parcel is currently approved for 262 units.
Back to the committed TIA improvements, was it just widening, or were there turn lanes that I missed on either end of Ralph Stevens Road in addition to the widening, or is that it?
I believe it was just
the
frontage is
widening?
what was recommended as part of the
Okay.
TIA. Yep.
Thanks.
And that TIA was part of the Stevens, you're calculating that as well? Okay.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none? None?
Anything else?
I'm like, I asked.
Not for them, no.
Okay,
I'm good.
Okay.
thank you all.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
And if the council still has, questions that the development plan could potentially answer, I mean, obviously, it's not something we would present tonight because it's not part of the case, but if it's the council's desire to review that development plan, we're happy to do that. If it would help answer the questions with respect to connectivity, again, it's not before you tonight. It would be in 2 months because it has been submitted for review. But that's something that we would certainly be willing to do if it would help you all get comfortable with the overall development proposal.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Back, Matt. Any further discussion with Matt? Seeing none?
Not for Matt, I mean, just generally, I think, I'll speak for myself, I think when we did our future land use plan, I personally at least envisioned something of a higher density on this parcel, right? So we're seeing that quickly after we put that plan into place and, knew it was going to be higher than what we had seen, given its proximity to some of the commercial that we have there already. I really don't like that RMF 15 in the middle there. So this helps us get away from that quite a bit. What I'm missing is some sort of pizzazz in what this is bringing to town. I think it's just what you see is it. I'm just not seeing a wow factor or something to say this is a unique development, a unique prospect that could make Holly Springs a better place. I think the developer could come to the table with something to help us see that vision, whether it's connectivity. There's an existing pond on one of the parcels. It looks like we're just going to fill that in and build homes over it. Could that be incorporated? I know that's a development plan consideration, but it's tough looking at these things separately. It's a cart before the horse kind of approach that we've got to make these decisions. And, I'm just a little torn on, is there something more that could really make this an influential, unique development for Holly Springs and make it the right piece for this parcel at a higher density? Right now, I'm just not seeing that.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm also, like I said, I'm just concerned that you're definitely doing the road improvements that are required, that the town asks you to do, but I think sometimes doing a little extra goes a long way, especially that small amount of area that leads right out to Avon Ferry Road. I am really, I just don't see how the road widening that is planned is really going to be beneficial in that area that is so heavy anyway. Anybody who's traveled down there in the morning or in the afternoon during rush hour will see what a mess it is. So people may go the other way, which will become just as bad with everything, all the other things going in there. And as Councilman Berry said also, it is just kind of feel like they're just throwing some townhomes up. We don't know what they're going to look like. I'm sure they're going to be beautiful, but we're at a point right now where we can be a little more, I guess you want to say a little more picky. I'd love, where we are asking for more green space, we're asking for more of a community for our residents, who choose to live in these areas. And the Greenway is kind of just takes up a small part of that they're offering, but I just wish a little bit more could be done that way.
How many of these questions can or should be answered at the development plan stage? Just a curiosity question on my part.
Probably some of them,
Yeah, definitely some of
but, I think if that's what we want to talk about, I'd be more inclined to table this and have some follow-up discussion with the developer on what their plan is and what maybe they could bring to the table, A lot of projects we see in Holly Springs, we're having meetings well in advance. This is a project we had not one meeting on before. I mean, I did because I was at the TRC, so I knew this was coming, or at least the concept of it was coming. But till this point, right, we had no discussion on what ultimately was going to be shown here tonight outside of the planning board meeting. I think that would have helped, and if we've got to table this to see if they can come to the table with something more, then I think that, for me, is the right action tonight.
Okay.
I agree.
I agree.
I'd like to see what the developer, you've listened to our concerns. I don't know if there's anything that you can do, but I'd like to table this and reach out, or have the developers reach out to us and,
Okay.
give us, our input on that, so.
All right, everybody agree?
Can I ask the council around so this is strictly residential now, and the multi-use, the commercial element, did we want any commercial in here or not? Because I know that we took it off of the,
Yeah.
And see, I think, we've said this a few times, that even though we took that commercial off there, if someone comes to us with a unique plan, we're definitely open to that. That's what, we definitely want to see that. Everything's not cut and dry, and I think, whether it's commercial, whether it's more green space, whether it's more meeting the needs, things are changing a bit, and we have these opportunities to take advantage of, and I think,
Right.
I agree that maybe is something, maybe not for this piece here, but just in
Someplace
general.
else.
Yeah, the plan is what it is, right? And the developer's interpreting the plan that we've put out there, and that's fair. And that's why I asked the question that I did in the discussion we had at the TRC was, I asked the same question about a mixed-use component or some sort of commercial there. I mean, there's parcels in the same vicinity that are identified for mixed use. As submitted, the parcels that we're looking at for a rezoning case are 4.5 units per acre if you average all three of them out. Add in the middle one, we're looking at 5.4. I'd feel a lot better about 5.4 with some mixed-use component built in there. So these are some of the things I would raise in a follow-up conversation with the developer on how we could meet somewhere. Is 4.5 over the whole thing a little better, or can we incorporate some mixed use for the higher density? If speaking for myself, I can get there on higher densities if there's that unique factor, a mixed use component, some commercial built in that would self-sustain the density that's going to be on those properties for the long term and add some benefit to the community. So for me, I'm open to it. It's not just because the plan says residential.
Right.
I'm certainly open to it.
I am as well. That was just one of the things I wanted to see. Unique, I like what you guys are saying, a unique opportunity for this area that's still very close to our downtown.
Okay, someone want to make a motion?
So are we motioning to table?
Well, there's
That's
two
why-
motions. So
Do we need to accept the compatibility
accept
statement if we table?
I
True.
would not do that if
No,
you're on
I-
the table.
yeah.
Yeah,
don't think
so I
so.
thought. I'll just make the motion to table action on 18 REZ 08.
Second.
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously, thank you. We'll work together.
We look forward to hearing from you all. We can meet in twos,
Right,
Thank you, Matt.
kind of like the ARC.
right.
We'll wait for just a minute. Agenda item 8A, consent agenda, Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously, thank you. Agenda item 9A, new business, 18 MAS 01 Lowe's Commercial Master Plan, Sean Ryan and Rachel Johns.
No, I lied. It's before that.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Sean.
I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of the project, and then the applicant has a very detailed presentation for you as well. So at the end, of course, if you have any questions for Rachel or myself, we'd be happy to address them if they are not covered in the applicant's presentation. But the purpose of this agenda item tonight is to consider a request for a detailed master plan or a commercial subdivision for this property. After that, we will request that you take action. This is an administrative action, and your motion option would be to approve or deny the detailed master plan. Just to familiarize yourself with the property, this is Ralph Stevens Road coming right underneath my mouse, moving from east to west. It's at the corner of Ralph Stevens and NC 55 GB Alfred Highway, located under my mouse here on the screen. It's located directly adjacent to the Wildwood subdivision, which is to the south of the property here. In size, it's about 36.5 acres in total. So just to take a step back to talk about the commercial development process in Holly Springs, just to give you an idea of where we're at with this project. Commercial development is typically a two-step process. The first step is the detailed master plan or the subdivision plan, and that's where we're at tonight. That establishes your framework for future development, so it subdivides your property into different lots that can be developed under the current zoning that is already established on the property. So it establishes the lot lines, the primary transportation network to serve those lots, the utilities to serve those lots, as well as common landscaping around the perimeter and your master architectural guidelines. So as different lots are built upon, all of the buildings follow the same architectural scheme. Once a project makes it through the master plan process, we then start to see the site-specific development plans. So that's when you would see the actual use of the property, so what is going to be built there, the locations of the buildings, the parking lot, the loading locations, pedestrian circulation, so your sidewalk locations, site lighting, and your building elevations. This is the future land use map and the current zoning map for the project area, which is outlined in yellow on both of these maps. The future land use plan designates this property as being a regional center, which is where the town has determined is the best location for power centers, including high-volume, high-intensity commercial uses. The property is zoned CB, community business, to reflect that regional center designation. And the community business zoning district is, again, that zoning district that the town has set aside for those high-intensity, high-impact commercial uses. This is the proposed master plan that the applicant has submitted. They're proposing to subdivide this into 3 tracks, A, B, and C. So the minimum number of lots would be 3, but the applicant would have the option to further subdivide into 8 smaller lots as long as they meet the minimum lot requirements in the community business zoning district. And just to zoom in a little bit further, you can see some of the internal networking of the access drives, the detailed open space up in the corner at the intersection of Ralph Stevens and NC 55, as well as some of the tree save areas that the applicant is proposing along the creek here, as well as along the south end of the property down towards the backside of the Wildwood subdivision. As I mentioned, architectural requirements are a component of the detailed master plan, so the applicant has offered a variety of complementary brick and stones as well as paint colors. So this will be the material and color palette that any of those lots, as they develop, will choose from to create that consistent landscape. With that, I will invite Rachel Jones in engineering to come up and talk about some of the engineering requirements.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Good evening.
Evening.
All right, so with this master plan, the developer will connect to town utilities. There's a water main on Ralph Stevens Road and Wildwood Farmway that the development will connect with. Also, sanitary sewer connection will be provided at the southern end of the site. The master plan was required to meet all of the town required environmental and stormwater requirements and ordinance standards. Okay, so with the master plan, a traffic impact analysis has been completed with a 6% annual growth rate, which is a little higher than our typical 5% annual growth rate. And that was in compliance with NCDOT and town standard requirements and ordinances. In addition to the TIA, after Planning Board, at their request, some additional analysis was performed at Site Drive 4 on Wildwood Farmway here. The results of that analysis is provided in your packet. All of the recommended improvements that were a result of the TIA have been incorporated into the plans. And all of those improvements, all infrastructure improvements, including traffic and utility improvements, are required to be completed with the master plan. So construction drawing approval for the development plans will not be allowed until these infrastructure improvements are installed. All right, and just to highlight some of the major improvements, there will be road widening required across the property frontage on Ralph Stevens Road. The developer is dedicating an additional 20-foot right-of-way on the bypass along their property frontage here to accommodate future 6-lane road cross-section on the bypass. NCDOT did require the installation and construction of Super Street on the bypass at the intersection of Ralph Stevens and Teal Lake Drive. And with the TIA analysis, a traffic signal warrant analysis was performed at Wildwood Farmway and Ralph Stevens Road. The results of that analysis did show a need for that traffic signal. So when NCDOT approves that signal, it will be installed, so either with the master plan or with one of the development plans that would come in on this site. Wildwood Farm Way is planned to be widened from Site Drive 3, shown here. Let me just go back one here. So from Site Drive 3 to Site Drive 4. That was not a town requirement, but it was offered by the applicant after they coordinated with the neighbors in Wildwood subdivision. Up until, from Ralph Stevens Road to Site Drive 3, there will be 4 lanes total with an exclusive left turn lane into Site Drive 3, a through lane going south, and then there will also be a left turn lane onto Ralph Stevens and a right turn lane onto Ralph Stevens.
Thank you.
And with that, I will invite our planning board representative, Rick Madoni, up to give the planning board discussion for this item.
Keeping you busy tonight, Rick.
So our biggest concern from the planning board was obviously the neighborhood right to the south and the traffic in the area, because we know how bad 55 can be. So some of our questions we learned about the road widening, this off-site improvements, the 55 super streets, the 55 turn lanes in front of Collins Park that they will be adding, which will be beneficial to the neighbors. We were concerned about the traffic impacts on the residential neighborhood, either on Ralph Stevens Road and Wildwood Way. Obviously, the landscape buffer between the two properties. So some of our conditions we were hoping that you would agree to would be, so they said they're going to do the minimum they can have to do on the buffer, tree buffer. We also wanted to, besides the tree buffer, have a fence in there also. So besides the minimum, add the fence to that. We're also hoping to have the buffer in place before the building was actually being worked on. So once maybe the property is graded, then maybe get the buffer in place to try to get the privacy as soon as possible. And we wanted to get a traffic light installed at Wildwood Ralph Stevens Road sooner than later. Work with NCDOT, whatever we can, because they said they don't know when exactly that will be installed. And we were looking at that second entrance on Wildwood Way to see if we could eliminate that. And obviously they did a TIA study, and it's in your packet. I haven't seen that yet. But we were trying to eliminate that, try to keep the cars from going too far into the neighborhood. That was the concern. Any questions? And we approved it 9-0.
What's Rick? 9-0.
Good?
Nope.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rick.
And with that, I will invite the applicant up to go through their presentation. And as I said, we'll be here for questions at the end if you have any for staff.
Okay. And again, please name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Todd Simmons. I'm with Freeland and Kaufman, 209 West Stone Avenue, Greenville, South Carolina. I'd like to thank the mayor and council for hearing us. As has been indicated by Sean, I think he's kind of gone over where the location is. I think you're all familiar with that. Just give you a little bit of introduction on our team. I've got Travis Spicer. He's the Director of Construction Development for Lowe's here with us. Reinald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp was our traffic engineer. Trent Farrell, the project architect, and Matt Bramblett was the environmental consultant. Just a little bit about Lowe's, founded in 1946 in North Wilkesboro, has grown to be a Fortune 50 company by this point. Kind of honing in site-specific capital investment for this site will be around $27 million, generate about 120 full and part-time jobs. I think kind of important to note from that standpoint that Lowe's does provide insurance benefits to both full and part-time, so we think that is a significant benefit to the associates that work there at Lowe's. A little bit about charitable giving. Obviously, it's an important concept to Lowe's. 2017 totals $42 million through a combination of investments to schools, communities, and disaster relief. So, and then kind of a note about where a social responsibility report could be found is there as well. So, A little bit about how we've gotten to where we are. Obviously, we've started this process several months ago. My guess is, I think maybe February or so, as we started meeting with town staff, NCDOT were kind of our first engagements as we worked through kind of what we thought we could do, how we thought we could fit on the site, and were we a good fit here. As we continue through that process, we've kind of worked extensively. I think you've heard from a few of the members of the Wildwood community. We've worked well with them, we think. We appreciate their willingness and really their attitude in kind of coming to this and working with us and trying to find a solution that worked for us and them, not necessarily just, we don't want you. It was always a collaborative effort into how can we make this work for both parties, and we really do appreciate that. We have kind of looked from an environmental standpoint as it relates to, we do have some wetlands on site. Those are noted on our site plan. We are still in the process of getting all the permitting for that, but that is in process. One thing, a couple of things to note, we are proposing right-of-way dedication, almost 9/10 of an acre as it relates to the widenings that are going to be required from our development on Wildwood, Ralph Stevens, and 55. I think Sean noted that kind of why we think this is that we're a good fit here. It has been identified as a regional center on the comprehensive plan. We think that is a good fit for us, and there is, I'll talk a little bit about the historic house that is on the property. There is a historic house that was identified here in this location. As we worked, and kind of why I highlighted the environmental consultant was Matt Bramlett with Hart and Hickman. He worked with Capillary Partners, or Preservation, I guess. They went to the site, they looked at the house, and I think the result was it's just dilapidated to a point where really wasn't much that could be saved. So from our project standpoint, I think what we're willing to do is kind of work with our demolition contractor, kind of give them direction, hey, if there's something that could be saved, could be reused, that we would do that, and kind of encourage them to do that. And if there's some way, I think we mentioned at the planning board, if there's some way that we could incorporate the brick of that or something in that as in our amenity area up that we've got planned at 55 and Ralph Stevens, that's something that we'd incorporate, and we'll continue to kind of work on that and see what could be done as it relates to that. And Sean also mentioned the tree preservation that we are proposing. I think we've got some areas along the back that I think provide good buffers for the residents that I think work well. And I think the town recently adopted a tree preservation ordinance that does not apply to us, I guess, from a timing standpoint, but we felt it important to at least kind of show that we are making an effort to understand how important that was to the town and go ahead and show that as part of our plan. We'll show a little bit on the plan, but we are working with town staff, Parks and Rec, on the Greenway. Currently, I think the Greenway connection is proposed down in this area. Right now on our plan, we show the Greenway would come around here, come around our southern property line, and currently would make its way up and expanded. We would expand the sidewalk, I guess, or I guess we would build a new sidewalk due to the widening here. As the conceptual route, I know we are continuing to be in talks with town staff that a better route may be to come straight across here and do a connection with the development that's going here. Kind of our stance on that is we'll continue to work with town staff, and we'll make whatever accommodations we can make to make the Greenway work. I don't think we have a real preference one way or the other. The only real concerns we have about this area would be environmental permits. Would those become problematic? But again, we're open to working through that as we can. So. Landscape buffers, as has been noted, I think that the town has a robust ordinance as it relates to buffers. So, we are proposing the required buffers along roadway frontages, the required buffer that is by the town when we abut residential in this location. And then we really, for most of this, I think we showed maybe planning to here, and then using existing. There is an existing very good evergreen row here that we would want to keep. And there's also some existing material back in this area that our current intention would be to maintain that and let that serve as the buffer as well. We have made a commitment to supplement the required buffer along this southern property line with a wooden privacy fence. There was some discussion at planning board whether that should be at the, grade wise, this will sit up above this. So does that fence want to be up at the top of the hill to provide maximum screening, or does it need to be at the bottom of the hill to kind of provide more, I guess, separation of the greenway from the residents? I think we're open to either of those options. And, obviously just want to be a good neighbor and build the fence where it could be the most benefit to the adjoining property owners. We do have a lot of transportation improvements noted as part of the TIA. I'll turn this over to Rhino in just a minute to kind of go through his process, anticipating that there probably will be a lot of questions as it relates to the methodology of the TIA. So Rhino has prepared kind of an in-depth presentation on that. The few things that I will point out that we did discuss related, one, to the planning board comment to examine eliminating this drive. I think this was brought up in planning board by some members of the Wildwood community as that they thought that elimination of that drive may be beneficial. We did do an analysis and look at that. We didn't see that it provided a benefit, and it's also our understanding that the community now kind of agrees that having two entrances would be better than having one entrance on that road. So, so to be able to kind of play on that and I guess do some things that we think are both helpful to us and them would be, and I think the biggest one is the widening that we've agreed to from this Site Drive 3 to Site Drive 4 to make that a 3-lane section. It was not a recommended TIA improvement, probably mainly because there's just no through traffic that was going to be opposing that left turn. So, there wouldn't have been a delay on the left turn coming in. So it would tell you, the TIA would tell you that it's not a required improvement, but I think, working with the residents and kind of looking at it, I think we agreed that it was a needed improvement. I think it will benefit both us and them. And then the other thing would be the traffic signal. The signal warrant analysis did say that that ultimately a signal would be required at this location. Probably not if it's just Lowe's that develops on this track B, that we probably won't trigger the need for that signal. But our commitment has been that we're ready to put it in immediately. So if we can get the town and NCDOT to say you can put it in right now as part of your initial development, even though you might not trigger it per the TIA, that we're willing to put it in at this time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over unless y'all have questions for me.
Before you do, yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious to know your reaction to the comments that were made at public comment period, all three people. Is that more of a detailed plan, development plan, timing, or is that something we need to talk about now?
I guess if I took some notes as I did that. So, I guess as I work it down, they talked some about the mail kiosk, which is currently here. Correct. Being relocated. And then they've got a sign here. I guess we're not, I guess what we've committed to is we're okay with some signage here saying there's no outlet going through. I think as it relates to, I guess I didn't know if they were asking us to relocate the mail kiosk or if they were talking in general. I know they talked about a waiver or.
Well, that was an important point, but I got the impression that they were asking the town also to comment on that subject later on. Am I correct?
Yeah, I gather that,
Is this 3230, that story about parking spaces and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because I think they've got 6 parking spaces here for their mail kiosk. It was my understanding they wanted to move their mail kiosk to kind of their rec location pool.
Right.
I mean, I think we're supportive of that. I guess what I was asking is I didn't know if the request was for the Lowe's development to do that relocation, or if it was just that they were needing some accommodation from the town. Maybe I can get some clarification on that.
I think it was both.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
I think it was both.
And as it relates to that, I'll let Travis speak to the monetary aspects of that, so.
Okay. Thank you.
So Travis Spicer, Lowe's Home Centers. I think we can work with the residents. If we can come to an agreement to keep me, say, off the property from actually doing the work, because we get our attorneys involved, that slows a lot of things down. But, if they can get it agreed, we can work with them on the cost. If they do use our contractor, however, I think we can work something out there. So, I'm just saying it'll go more expeditiously if you get it approved. You give them the variance, it sounds like, for 2 spaces, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And, we get a cost, they get a cost, but somehow I'm just saying, if you say Lowe's has got to do it, my attorneys are going to get involved, we're going to get indemnities. If we can go a different route, fund it through a contractor or something else, I think we can work on it monetarily speaking. So,
I guess what I'm saying is there room in this concept for a master plan approval, subject to working with the people that talked tonight and us on the detailed development plan later on? Is that the way this thing is supposed to work, or could work? I don't know.
Sean, with the relocation of a mail kiosk, would that trigger an additional development plan, or how do we take action on that? I mean, it's a USPS designation on where they ultimately approve it can be, but will that come back for approval, or is that a staff administrative item?
So we have looked at it preliminarily, and as the resident had pointed out, there is a parking issue that's going to come up if it gets moved to the rec site. There just isn't enough parking there right now to accommodate particularly the North Carolina Building Code requirement that has a dedicated handicap parking spot that is separate from the 2 that are already out there. So we can certainly assist the applicant and the residents into exploring moving that mail kiosk and identifying the proper approval steps to doing that. However, since that property is not part of the master plan, you would not see it as the detailed development plans come in. It would likely either be done through a zoning permit or through a plan amendment to the Wildwood Rec Site development plan.
Okay. And as far as any waivers or variances that were required, would they be below a council threshold, or would they come back if there was anything that would trigger that?
So there are some specifications that the planning director can approve a parking reduction waiver, but typically you have to have an area set aside that you can provide that parking in the future. That can be done through a development plan amendment. Otherwise, you would have to go to the Board of Adjustment to seek a variance outside of a special exception use, which this would be not. So that would not be something that would come back to the town council. It would go to the Board of Adjustment, where they would have to demonstrate the hardship to that board.
Okay.
Well, the reason I'm asking these questions, this is a solid plan, and I think a company that we would welcome into our town, and we've talked about this for more than a year or 2. I'm just looking at what's the process we have to go through to at least discover and talk about and then resolve the kinds of things we brought up today. That's all. And I think that's what we're talking about right now. Good plan.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else, Travis?
Other specific questions?
I had some questions. When we met, it was before, the things have changed a lot since we've met.
Just a little.
Compliments to you, because I've heard from the residents that you've been very good to work with and looking for a joint solution. When we met, I was asking, my mind was also on the bypass and the impact this will have on the bypass. And we talked about, one, this is in the gateway of the town, so how will this look to feel like it's part of, our mission is like village-like, and asking you about a box store coming in the beginning of the town. What will you do to try to make it feel like it's part of a village versus a store? And then also, we had talked about the trucks that are going to come in to Lowe's. When we were talking about the number of volume of trucks coming in for both Lowe's and whatever other store may come, you said the only way they could come in was off of the bypass. Now with the other expansion of the road, will that remove some of those big trucks from being on the bypass?
So I think the intent is, like our trucks, and I can't speak for this exactly as to how many trucks they may have, but, you know, our trucks typically come from the interstate. They'd come in 55 right here at this access, which this doesn't show our site plan, but we got a turnaround here. So they come in behind the building, turn around, come back out, and then as part of the super street, we got to do U-turn improvements that you'll see here in a minute when we get to an aerial that'll show a lot of these roadway improvements. I think it'll better help understand the traffic flow. But I mean, we can do a truck routing plan. Now, I'm not going to say truck drivers sometimes do what they want to. So, you know, they may come in here and try to come in, but we typically try to keep truck traffic off the front drive aisle. So if they were to come in here, they would probably come around this perimeter drive and do what they got to do. We discourage and try to make things tight so that they don't come across the front drive aisle. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but you know, I think we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into the traffic study, and maybe that'll clear some of the stuff up.
Okay, you're going to do this now?
We can.
Okay.
Unless you have other questions.
Nope.
Yeah, I do.
do.
In terms of the noise, where the residents had, had some questions or issues with noise, what time of the day are the deliveries typically
Yeah, so
for Lowe's?
Yeah, for Lowe's, I mean, I spoke to the market director who, he has multiple stores in this location. So what he's telling me is on a high volume store, now until we open, I don't know if it's high volume or, but typically we average 10 trucks a day, and the receiving hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So there is a couple trucks per week that come in earlier for the contractor sales, which is over on this side. That's like 2 trucks a week. So, again, that's what our market director is telling us, or telling me.
Nothing
And he
after 9
should know.
o'clock?
So
You don't anticipate anything after 9 o'clock?
I don't anticipate
Late.
anything. I know a lot of times, when you're backed up to residential, I mean, we can put some no idling signs up in the parking lot. We've done that before. Let's just say that a truck driver does come in here at night or something, and he thinks he's going to park there overnight and wait. I mean, we can at least try to detour, if that were to happen, have them to cut the motor off so that they're not disturbing residents. So.
Okay, and then on the widening of Wild Farm Way, it's completely going to be 3 lanes, or?
So Ramey will get into that a little bit more, but so we're widening to a 3-lane section here today. So, you're coming out here, if you're coming to the residence, let's say you can come straight on through, but there'll be a dedicated left turn lane here to come in. And then this right here is pretty much going to be 4 lanes. So you'll have dedicated right out, dedicated left out, dedicated left in, and then this is pretty much your through movement. So.
Okay. I thought there was an issue with the buffer there that had to be 50 feet. Are we absorbing any type of
Yeah, so I
parking
think as we get
spots
into
there?
as we get into the detailed development plan and start looking at it, I think, town ordinance says this buffer's got to be 50 foot. So I think, today we've got it shown 50 foot. I think our concern is, say, through here, we may need to ask for a waiver to reduce that so that we don't lose any parking. I don't think we're talking going from 50 to 20. I think we're probably talking going 50 to 40 or something like that. So a 10-foot waiver, essentially, just in the areas that, it affects the parking is what we would ask for.
Again, you're going from 4 lanes to 3 as they come towards the entrance of their development there. Okay.
Other questions?
When do you think you'll submit your development plan?
November the 2nd or 9th, whenever, I think it's the next submittal date. November the 9th, I think, maybe.
And you were, after development plan approval, were you like 12-month build out, if I recall from when we met?
Yeah, I think, I think we're planning on, we just did an RFP out to contractors. I think we were giving them 280 days. So that's all the roadway improvements. That's all the Lowe's, that's all required infrastructure, rough grade and mass grade, all the landscape, and then naturally fully Lowe's developed building and all.
Thanks.
The buffer that you discussed that you would put on the bypass side, and then you said, but you're giving room if it goes 6 lanes, is that going to disturb the buffer?
Here, I don't know that we have a buffer here, do we? We have the town. I think it's outside the right-of-way dedication line. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it'll start from the proposed right-of-way line into the property.
Okay.
And then I think, when we met, the gateway in, so this is wetlands. It's tree safe through here, so we're not really grading this out. This was an old pond, and there's some wetlands in here. Pretty much trying to leave that the best that we can. So this parcel here is envisioned pretty much as open space. We have no intentions of developing that in the future, so.
And in terms of the fence along the property line there, how high is that fence going to be?
I think we were proposing 8-foot privacy fence. And again, I think, it's a matter of where do you want it. I mean, if you want it down on the property line, I think that's maybe addresses some security. I think that maybe addresses some issues with the greenway. Or again, we can put it behind the curb. So if you move it up behind the curb line, I think you've got to deal with, naturally you're going to have some landscaping, but you're going to have, greenway and everything else coming through there. So I think we're open to either one. It's a preference to what you or the residents want. Another thing too, I think planning board talked about, putting these plantings in, I guess the advantage to putting the fence along the property line, is we could probably do that earlier in the construction process. Then we could, say, do plantings, because we got to get it graded. I'm not going to plant it, grade it, cut it out, plant it. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But, I think we could put the fence in very early on and still be able to grade for the most part, and then do the plantings after the fact, if it's on the property line.
Yep, you mentioned that before.
And that fence was an add-on, correct? It wasn't was that a required fence, or that was the add-on that was asked for?
It's not required per the ordinance, and we're not looking to substitute that in lieu of landscaping. So, I mean, we're meeting the landscape
Supplement.
plannings and adding fence
Great.
in addition.
And I again want to compliment you for not only keeping all of us informed, but talking to the citizens involved there, and the attitudes they bring here is a positive one with a lot of questions, not a lot of questions, but some questions. And that's why I said, at what phase do we kind of get to that, okay? But
Yeah, and the residents they've been great to work with, so.
works both ways,
So
team effort. Other
We
questions
want-
or comments at this point?
we want to dive into traffic now.
Let's go TIA.
I'm trying to get off the hot seat.
Turn it over.
All right, Travis,
Okay.
thank you.
I thought he was doing so well. I wanted him to do the traffic. So he's doing so well. Again, Reinald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp and Associates, 5808 Farrington Place in Raleigh. I have a lot of slides, and just anticipating there'll be a lot of questions on the traffic and transportation. So there's a lot of slides and a lot of information. So what I'm planning to do is go through that relatively quickly. And if we need to back up and look at something or talk about something more, we can, but just for the sake of trying to move it along, try to go through it relatively quickly. So as you know, we did a TIA report for the project, and just to be clear, it includes more than just the actual Lowe's. It's the entire property, the entire development. We did work with the town and NCDOT very closely throughout, following the guidelines and everything that's required there. We have done a few iterations of the traffic study to addressing various comments and looking at some of these things that you've heard tonight, reducing driveways, adding turn lanes, those kinds of things. So, and everything's been agreed to in terms of road improvements and what we're planning to do. So the intersections that were included in the TIA was the bypass and Ralph Stevens, Teal Lake, Ralph Stevens and Wildwood Farm Way, Ralph Stevens and Main Street, Piney Grove Wilbon, and then the bypass at the Walmart driveway, which is a leftover. Just a map of that. Our sites here outlined in red. The intersections that we're talking about are shown in yellow. And I didn't show this in yellow, but this 55 and Ralph Stevens Super Street required us to look at the U-turns on each end of the intersection, so south and north as well. The traffic study considered or analyzed the weekday rush hour and the weekday afternoon rush hour, weekday morning, weekday afternoon rush hour. Those are generally 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. The scenarios that we looked at, that the analysis was completed for, was existing conditions. And as I said earlier, we take traffic counts over a 2-hour period. We take the highest 1 hour in that period. Whenever that falls, the highest 1 hour. And that's what the existing conditions is modeled on, or models. The background, which is the no build, it's just the future growth. We had a 6% growth, and we also included other developments. And then we also looked at the kind of the build condition with the addition of the development, and this is the full build out of the development, not just the Lowe's. So we did take traffic counts, as I said, on 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. When schools were in session, and this may be a little too technical, but the traffic volumes were balanced between the intersections, which means if you have 100 cars leaving one, we adjusted the counts upwards to make sure there's 100 cars coming into the next one. So there's no cars disappearing or anything between the intersections. The traffic growth rate was based on historical counts, but it's actually higher than the historical counts would suggest. And the other developments that we included were Collins Park, Honeycutt Farms, and Southern Crossroads. And the traffic from those were taken from their traffic studies. This is the trip generation, and I want to point out just a few things here. There's a lot of numbers on here. So the site, we assumed the site would include 36,000 square feet of retail space, a supermarket, a relatively large supermarket, 90,000 square feet, and then the Lowe's home improvement store. So it's a fairly intense from a traffic standpoint. We're trying to model, as I think Rachel or Kendra pointed out earlier, the worst case, kind of the worst case condition. A couple things I want to point out. This is showing a total of almost 16,000 trips a day. That does not account for, that does not really adjust for the traffic that's already on the roads. Just because there's not data that says your daily traffic would be reduced by X percent. But so what I wanted to point out too on this table was that in the afternoon in particular, about 1/3 of the traffic is already on the road. That's what we call the pass-by traffic. So that's traffic already going north or south on 55 or north or east or west on Ralph Stevens. They're already going that way. They just decide, I'm going to stop in and buy groceries or pick up something from Lowe's and get right back on the road, continue going the way they were. So that's not new traffic. That's just new turns that are being made at the driveways. As I said, about 1/3 of the traffic is already there in the afternoon traffic. The AM in the morning is much lower than the afternoon. I think you could probably see on the table that we had about 655 in the morning total, and about 934 in the afternoon. So the morning does generate fewer trips. And another thing I want to point out that you can't really take into account in the traffic studies is that being that there's not a home improvement store right in town now, right in this area now, folks are still driving to those, but they're driving to maybe Fuquay or Apex. So when the store is here, those folks are not driving as far. So they're not driving all the way up 55 or down 55 to go to these stores. They're coming here. Can't really take that into account. Just wanted to point that out, that you don't really get credit for reducing traffic further away from the property. But trip distribution, again, a summary of where the traffic is going. About 45% was to the north, 30% to the south, and I got 20 to 26% west on Ralph Stevens, and that's because we think some people may go a different way. They may come in one way but go a different way out. And I can explain that more if we need to. And then there's a little bit of traffic we assigned to Wildwood Farm Way and Teal Lake just because of the residential neighbors. So and the trips are assigned, we look at where the people live, basically, is how we figure out these percentages I just described. One thing I would point out is that Site Drive 1, which is the right-in, right-out driveway on NC 55, one of the revisions that we made or updates that we made to the traffic analysis was the traffic that was leaving that site driveway onto 55 was experiencing some delays, and it was causing some stacking back into the site. And so one of the adjustments we made to that was we went back and took some of that traffic off of that driveway and sent it out onto Ralph Stevens instead of coming out on the 55 to accommodate that. And because people are generally going to go the path of least resistance, and that's what we thought would happen. This is hard to see, but if we need to go back and refer to it, we can. But this is just showing the site. 55 is here. The 45% travels north. The 30% on NC 55 to the south. And then we have some traffic on Piney Grove, Wilbon, Main Street, and Ralph Stevens, just kind of showing you a rough idea of where that traffic is going. And then you can see the U-turns, each side there as well. So we can back up to that if we need to look at those in more detail. But overall, the analysis results is with all the road improvements that are being done, the intersections are going to operate, generally the same or better than if the development was not there. The big one is obviously this super street or synchronized street at 55 and Ralph Stevens. That is I probably can't overemphasize how important that improvement is for the town and the traveling public. But that's going to provide a much improved operation at that intersection than if it remained the full movement intersection that it is today. If you saw the improvements at Avent Ferry and 55, it would be something similar to that in terms of the level of improvement. And we did do some signal warrant analyses that I'll explain in just a minute. Again, I'm going to try to go through this part even faster, but this is the synchronized street at 55 and Ralph Stevens. And what I want to point out is that what I was saying earlier is that in the future, this intersection would go to a level service F, and then with the improvements that we're going to make, it gets it back to this level service C that would happen without the development. So that improvement is really mitigating any impacts there at that location. The U-turn to the south of Ralph Stevens Road is level of service C. This is the morning, the afternoon level service C. It is signalized, and it does have two U-turn lanes. That's what that is showing, 2 U-turn lanes. So again, that works at a good level of service. The northern U-turn has less traffic. This is the traffic U-turning there is traffic coming out of Teal Lake Drive. So the traffic there is much lower. So we anticipate that to be unsignalized. So there'll be a little more delays there, but the traffic volumes are really low. So it would not warrant a signalization or, double U-turn lanes there. It's just a low traffic movement. Ralph Stevens and Wildwood Farm Way. The reason we were looking at a signal here, I'll point out quickly, is that in the future, we were showing level service E, level service F, trying to turn out of Wildwood Farm Way. With a traffic signal, it's level service B at that intersection, which is very good for this area. So we do think the signal will be something that will help this intersection. Piney Grove, Wilbon, Main Street, Ralph Stevens, that intersection. Again, we're looking at, that intersection is not that bad. Obviously, it's a new intersection. Level service Bs and Cs now and in the future. There were a few little improvements there that we were looking at. Well, one improvement in particular, which is a future turn lane at the intersection that we would be contributing towards. As I mentioned earlier, the driveway on 55 bypass, which it's restricted to a right in, right out. So there's not much more restriction you can do there, but it's wouldn't be signalized, but we were showing level service F in the afternoon, which, you know, it's pretty typical of any driveway on NC 55 that doesn't have a signal, and some that do have signals. But we did move some of the traffic there to make that more, more acceptable or tolerable. So we did move traffic away from there. Ralph Stevens and what we label Site Drive 2 is also a right in, right out. You can see level service B there. No real issues there. Wildwood Farm and Site Drive 3, and this was the one that we looked at pretty carefully with the improvements that we're making. It's level service A. There's not a lot of traffic on Wildwood Farm Way, but a lot of the concern that the neighbors expressed and staff, everybody, was just that how are you going to get your traffic in without really impacting them? So that's why you see the additional turn lanes and widening on that road. It's just to get our traffic out of there as quickly as we can with minimal impact to the neighbors who are driving up and down Wildwood Farm Way. Real quickly, the signal warrants. This is another thing that came out of comments and some back and forth dialogue that we had. We looked at two locations. One of those is Ralph Stevens and Wildwood Farm Way. As you've heard, it's something that we would like to do, and we will think it will meet warrants. It'll help the neighborhood, help the development as well, and it does meet enough of the warrants that it looks like it will be warranted in the future. DOT typically doesn't want a signal to go in unless there's traffic there to warrant it. So enough traffic there. They don't want to get calls from somebody driving down Ralph Stevens who has to stop for one car to turn out, onto Ralph Stevens Road at a light. Then one car really wouldn't need that signal. But the 55 bypass and the Walmart driveway, we did look at that. That's the leftover driveway at Walmart. It's just north of here, and that meets some of the warrants too. But the difference here is that the development doesn't cause any of those warrants to be met. The development's not increasing the need for a signal there. The other issue with a signal there is that it stops 55 traffic, and so that's, you start stopping that large traffic volume, you're going to obviously increase queuing and those kind of delays for folks traveling down 55, and it's already restricted. So what we kind of determined or concluded there is that it's probably more appropriate for Walmart to bring that to the table to DOT at some point in the future than it would be for us at this point. So as you've heard, the development is making significant improvements. The Ralph Stevens 55 synchronized street or super street. There's a U-turn associated with that north and south of the intersection. Another thing I don't want to overlook is that the Walmart today, when folks leave the Walmart, they're turning right and they're coming down to make a U-turn at the Teal Lake intersections. They're coming down, making a U-turn there, which is, it's usually not ideal to have U-turns and left turns into a side street at the same location. So as part of the super street improvements that we would be making, we're going to add a U-turn lane for the Walmart that's more convenient to them. And I'll show you that in just a minute on the aerial so you can see where I'm talking about. And then obviously widening Ralph Stevens Road to half of the ultimate section, and a little bit different than what we talked about in the previous case, rezoning case that I was up speaking on. This widening, the widening that we're doing, we can actually use it to get have two through lanes. So earlier I was saying there's extra pavement on the outside. With this, the way everything lays out, we can actually get the two through lanes and use those. So we are going to get the extra capacity in this case. The widening on Wildwood Farm Way, you've heard several people have mentioned that already, but it's widening Wildwood Farm Way to have another left turn lane or another lane on it, and then installing the traffic signal we talked about. This is the figure from the TIA that shows all the improvements that would be made and who would be making them. So there's some improvements that other developers are going to be making. You can see Collins Park here, all the stuff in red, and even this stuff in green over here would be done by the development. And then this is the aerial I was referring to that has the improvements on it. And what I was saying earlier is that this is Ralph Stevens and Teal Lake here. So north of there, we'll have a U-turn. We'll be building a U-turn at this location for Teal Lake Drive traffic. So they would come out, make a right turn, make a U-turn, and head back south. The new U-turn would be here for Walmart. Walmart is just off the page up here, so they have to turn right on the 55. So, and today they have to come all the way down to Teal Lake and make that U-turn and come back. We'd be building them essentially their own U-turn there as part of the super street. South of Ralph Stevens, there's a U-turn, in this location. We do have. You can see the widening kind of here in white on Ralph Stevens. And then widening along Wildwood Farm Way, which I think you've seen earlier. This will essentially be a minimum of a 3-lane road from Ralph Stevens, down to the southernmost driveway location. And then in this little area here, it would actually be 4 lanes wide. We are anticipating a traffic signal here at some point in the future at that location. But that gives you an idea of the road improvements. The other improvement that I do want to point out, and I think that I don't know if it was mentioned very clearly earlier, is that there's a right turn lane that would be built on NC 55 bypass onto Ralph Stevens in this location. Through some of the analysis and the kind of the coordination efforts on this, it was requested that this right turn lane be marked to be a through and a right turn lane, which would require more pavement on the south side. So you essentially pick up a 3rd lane going south on 55 through through Ralph Stevens down to the driveway point. So that's something I don't know that was maybe clearly mentioned earlier, so I did want to point that out as well. So that's the traffic. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions, specific questions.
Are there intended to be lights at all those U-turns?
Yes.
Probably so. Again, it's going to be. I would anticipate there to be. We assumed that there would be. The only one that may not, I think, would be if the traffic coming out of Teal Lake to make this U-turn is really low, and so it's very low. So that one probably would not be signalized, but I think the others certainly would be signalized. Certainly the one to the south.
Think so, Kendra?
Yes, our conversations with DOT in the past, because they've identified this as a corridor for super streets,
Right.
is having those signalized U-turns is very important for safety.
Thank you.
Yeah, if they require it to be signalized, we obviously would. We'll
Sure.
have to do that.
Other questions?
Has the ship sailed with DOT at super streets already? Like, there's no alternatives. It's their mandate that this is super streets because we've already got them, and now we're going to have more U-turns and more lights that undoubtedly will slow down traffic on the bypass. We already have one at Maine, Avon Ferry, Ballantine, all the way down the bypass before it actually lets up. Now we're going to have 2 more for the traffic that's coming from out of town, into town, through town. And this is their solution. There's no alternative.
it may be hard to sort of, it may seem a little counterintuitive, but having more signals, but with fewer movements at each signal, actually helps traffic on 55 significantly. I'm sure everybody remembers Avent Ferry in 55 before it was.
I drove that one. I heard it before. Less
Yeah,
lights, less movements. I get it from,
Yeah.
you know, an engineering standpoint, but driving it every day, I don't get it at all.
And when they're hardly synchronized, you know, or, oh, there's a little glitch or this or that. It just took how many years to even get them synchronized? I think that last
It's red,
day.
it's red from the first U-turn to the last U-turn. Once you get past Main Street, it turns green. I mean, red being traffic backed up,
Yeah.
green flowing. I don't anticipate a level of service of C through the bypass past the Lowe's Hardware. I think we'll just end up with red all through until we get the exchanges or something else takes place. But it seems NC DOT has hook, line, and sinker in this.
It is what they would call a temporary or short-term kind of improvement. I think they understand it's more, you know, bigger things have to be done with interchanges or grade separations, but, you know, those are an order of magnitude or two more expensive to do. So this is still expensive, but it's a little more feasible to try to do something now.
It's an expensive Band-Aid for
It's an
the
expensive
ultimate
Band-Aid.
solution that we need, you know.
Expensive
it's-
Band-Aid. That's a good way to put it.
Why is the right out on 55 so short? Because you have right in is a long lane, but right out, there's hardly anything.
Oh, you mean here in this location?
Uh-huh.
The DOT has gone away from what we call acceleration lanes. So that would be, you know, if you turned out on the 55, you had a lane there, you would turn out in a lane and then you'd have to merge over. They've gone away from doing that in almost every instance.
Work that out somehow, so.
Anyone have any idea how much that would cost? Sounds like you're just better off building a new one. Right.
I don't know, I mean, we've not run an estimate. I mean, you know, it depends, I mean, if you. Right, yeah, I think we gotta work with the town and figure out what, from a sign standpoint, to know what we're looking at, and, you know, the same thing with whatever we work out variance-wise on parking, moving the kiosk, so I don't know that I can tell you what it's gonna cost today. I think we just gotta work through the cost and see what we do.
This is important because from a safety standpoint, we can't have residents pulling into the existing mailboxes right there with all the traffic there. So I just want to make sure that if we do move forward on this, that we have some type of plan in place
That this is gonna happen.
that we're going to either have Lowe's help financially.
Is that TV on? If you cut that off, why don't y'all just, if y'all condition it, I don't know that I can get out of it, so, I mean. You know what I mean? That way I'm not sitting up here and
Travis,
incriminating
is this the first Lowe's you've ever built?
myself. No.
You're on TV. You're live.
Well, they can edit that. maybe.
You're live.
But, so, I mean, I think, you know,
So that's a big thing for me to make sure that.
I mean, I think we are willing to do whatever we gotta do. So,
Gotcha.
I mean, I think if it's a matter of, you know, we work out the cost or logistics, or, you know, if I say, hey, get our contractor to do it, you know, but if I can just keep from actually performing the work
Okay.
on the property, I think
Got
that
that.
keeps the legal out of it.
Sean, have we notified the Postal Service that we're considering moving this?
Yes, they have.
So we did inform the residents that that would be the first step, is to get the Postal Service to okay. According to the residents, they have okayed that. I haven't seen anything, but I'm sure that we can get that from them.
Okay, we need that. We need that.
Absolutely.
I got you.
Heard that, yeah. I got it.
Yeah, we haven't taken a detailed look at what it would actually involve to move that mail kiosk. Of course, if there's parking that needs to be added, is that, what's the construction cost
Right.
of that? So we haven't done a full detailed review, so I think that's probably why it's a little bit difficult for the applicant to tell you how much it's going to cost them, because we just haven't seen anything on paper at this point in time.
Okay.
All right, so, but we have heard that the town, that they should have 2 more spaces.
Correct.
What if there is nowhere to put those 2 spaces?
So that's why I think it's important for all of us to sit down and take a look at what it's going to take so that we as staff can identify kind of what those hurdles are and then how do we overcome those hurdles. I'm not going to say it can or can't happen. I think we just need to sit down and take a look at it and get something on paper so that we can
They have 30
identify those
spots right
issues.
now. So
Right.
could they allocate to?
That's what we're talking
Just give
about.
them 28.
We have discussed if a waiver would allow us to.
That's what we did.
Right,
Bring
so-
their
Years back.
pool parking down to 28.
For the size facility that they have, they are required to have 30 parking spaces at that facility, which they do. If you add a mail kiosk to that facility, you're then required to have 32, one of those being a handicap that's completely dedicated to the mail kiosk. So we're essentially too short if we add a mail kiosk to that site. And so that's where I think we need to sit down and identify kind of what the next steps forward are on that.
Okay.
Got it.
And if we do go forward, I really ask, especially with the rebuilding of the entrance monument and things like that, that we do involve, maybe there's I know you don't have your own HOA yet, but that we do involve, one or two of the residents who have taken charge on this, just to.
Absolutely. The sign would have to be moved onto HOA property, so they would have to be, the residents or the HOA would have to be involved.
Right,
with
but I think that's the builder right now, it's not the residents, so I think they can work that out.
Okay.
Sean, if the TIA was based on 6% growth, what if it was 10% growth? Would that change anything on what's happening on the bypass?
Kendra, Rachel, do you want to handle that?
Ron was probably the best one for that.
I don't think it would impact what the improvements are. And the actual growth, the actual increase in traffic from today to the future years, more than 6% per year, just because we're adding in all those other developments as well. I don't know exactly what that number would be, but I think in general, it was increasing the traffic by probably 25% over what's there today, at least, in that ballpark. So it's 6% per year, plus all the other traffic from the other developments that I mentioned earlier, Collins Park, Honeycutt Farm, Southern Crossroads. So the net result would be more than 6% traffic in our traffic study. So it's more than 6% per year. I don't know if we're quite to 10, but it's there's a lot. I don't think it would change anything.
So Kendra, what have we learned from the other super streets that we can do? Like, I'm really worried about causing the traffic issues to be on the other side of town now we don't have it. Is there anything we've learned from the super streets in front of the target area that we could apply and reduce some of the issues we've had?
The biggest learning point was having them tied in via fiber instead of the radio read.
Yep.
So that was something we learned. It was painful, and we learned from it. And going forward, we would have those wrapped in on the fiber network. Trying to think of other.
Because that helps with the synchronization.
Right. It helps it hold the
Synchronize.
signal timing plan, and it helps it minimize the drift of the signals that happens when they're talking via radio. That's probably the biggest lesson learned. Proper signage, and DOT maintains all of those signals, and so today when we get those complaints, we have to communicate with DOT, and they have to come out and fix those. And where we're moving, our town's moving, is we've met with Carrie several times. We're starting to talk about looking to the future to maintain our own signals, and so that we could be more real-time and responsive to signal issues. So that's something on the horizon that we're looking to do.
What's that horizon?
So we've started meeting with Carrie because they have that set up, and so we've talked to them about perhaps entering into an agreement with them, just starting the discussions about them maintaining our signals for a while until we get up and running, hire staff, and have a place for them to actually run the signals. So that's, we're having those discussions, but that's something I think for not just the bypass, but all over town, so that we can be more responsive to our citizens with signals. that's, what we're looking to do in the future.
It's still on DOT's plan, we just gotta make sure it stays there. Remember, we talked about that.
Right. Yeah.
That's a key factor.
I think just communication and trying to get the signal timing plan so that it runs efficiently. And that was with the fiber.
Okay. What else? Good?
I guess one thing back to the kiosk, since I think that's,
We'll get this all resolved, we don't have to do anything next time. Whatever.
I think our biggest obstacle would be that it just can't be a blank check, obviously. I mean, so there's got to be some sort of limited, in kind with what they have, or, something that it can't be an unreasonable expectation if it is conditioned that we have to do something. So that's all we would ask.
I think just stepping up to the table is a great thing, right? And if it comes to a cost share or whatever you guys figure out with their HOA or the residents, it's a great step for you guys to do this. So certainly understand that and appreciate you stepping up.
Agree. Oh, Sean? Anything left?
That's it, unless you have any additional questions.
Okay. If not, let's go to motions. There is only one, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Someone hit a motion?
I will do it.
The two conditions.
Do we need to,
It sounded like the fencing they were gonna add anyway, and then the landscape buffer being done after the site is graded.
right,
I would support adding both of those conditions that the planning board called out.
I agree.
Do we have to put any verbiage in there about moving the kiosks? I'm sure we do, right?
And building,
It's your call.
Add a condition, 15.
Probably.
have to enter into discussion about it, or?
Make it
That the
15.
town will work with the folks at Lowe's to work on an agreement to move the kiosks for the postal service.
Make that number 15. Make sense?
Is that good, John?
Well, I don't know what the town's involvement would be, other than to potentially grant a variance as to a couple parking spaces, and we can't really put that in
Right.
here. But you could just say that the developer is to cost share and contribute to the relocation of the Wildwood mail kiosk to a acceptable location under acceptable terms by both parties. And if those terms can't be worked out, then the town could get involved, I suppose. But
An entrance sign.
I think you're talking about a couple $1,000s to pick up a box and rebolt it to a foundation
think.
that they're probably know how to put in. I don't think it's too onerous, so.
And does that include the entrance sign?
Did you get all that, Tom?
Or is that?
We didn't talk about, in detail.
What's that?
The sign, just add the sign.
The signage.
It's the same contingencies, just that they're gonna work cost share and consider relocating the kiosk and the sign to a feasible location.
We put it together? That's a question.
Okay, so
Wanna
that's
try
number
it?
15, put it together, or do we have to separate it and put it together?
Put it all together. I think Joni's probably got enough to word the motion. You're talking about cost share participation in both the kiosk and monument sign relocation.
Yes?
Got it.
Somebody just needs to say so moved.
Yep.
So moved.
Somebody needs to say second.
All in favor, so moved.
Second.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Did we say aye?
Yeah, we didn't say aye, you said all in favor, we didn't say aye yet.
I thought you did.
No.
I misunderstood.
did.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
One nay. Motion passes with one nay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're gonna clear the room.
Tired. Okay, agenda item 9B, new business, midterm planning board appointment. We'll wait for a minute, yeah. Oh, I know. Gina, be ready.
We need to do these at the beginning next time.
Thanks to all you guys for coming out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Yep, yep,
So people
yep.
Okay, new business, midterm planning board appointments. Gina.
This agenda item is to fill a midterm vacancy on our planning board for the ETJ member. Mr. John Stolarik was our ETJ member, got appointed last January, and he is moving to our urban services area, not within our ETJ, and so he can no longer serve in that role for the town. And so tonight, we are asking that you make a recommendation to the Wake County Board of Commissioners, as it is their responsibility to officially appoint ETJ members to our board. And so we did send out postcards to almost 900 ETJ residents directly. We did advertising on the webpage, Facebook, Nextdoor, all the social media outreaches, and we have received 2 applications.
Let's start with the left, and the next time we'll start with the right. Dan, you want to start?
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
What we've done in the past, if I may, excuse me, is just simply the name and maybe a couple words of why.
Yep. Small field, being ETJ, only 2 applicants. I think both are qualified. I am going to make Michael Andreas my first choice. I think in, reasoning, he was prior lived in Apex before moving to our ETJ and was involved in some of the functions over there, their business association. And he lives in an area of town that, is going to be growing probably pretty soon, farther than what it is today. And I think, additional representation and thought in that area, specifically in the ETJ, would be beneficial. I think either of the candidates are qualified to do this, but since we have to pick, I will go with Mr. Andreas as my pick.
Okay. Sherry?
I agree, and basically, either one would have been great, but for the same reasons, with 540 coming over there and a lot of different changes, it would be good to have somebody. So I'll say Michael Andreas.
Got it?
Yeah, I appreciate both candidates submitting, and ditto. It's a area of town that has not had much representation in the past, and there's a lot coming that way.
Okay, let's fill it out.
Both are qualified for sure. I did choose Malcolm Aldridge. He's in that Sappy kind of area there, and like I said, both of them are qualified.
Sure.
Malcolm is a civil designer as well, so either or, but I'm going to recommend Malcolm Aldridge.
Christine?
When I looked at again, both are very qualified. I thought with Sappy and all the activity, I also was leaning more towards Malcolm.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Mr. Aldridge.
Aldridge?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, it's 4-1. Someone make a motion for?
3-2.
3-2, excuse me, 3-2. Someone for Michael Andreas, please.
Motion to recommend Wake County Board of Commissioners appoint Michael Andreas to fill the remainder of the ETJ member term ending February 29th, 2020 on the Holly Springs Planning Board.
Second.
What's been made second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you to both.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks to both for
That was a
that,
hard
right.
decision.
Yep. Agenda item 9C, new business, open seat on the Park and Rec Advisory Committee. Let's go this way and start with.
So they have 6 months, right? This is from
What is it, Gina? 6, well, you don't know, Gina?
next
There we
one.
go. It's not Gina, it's
We're talking about Parks and Rec.
sorry.
So it's
June 30th?
I think we can have up to one.
Right,
We
we
don't
don't
have
don't
to.
have to.
Right. We don't have to.
Right.
Correct. Right.
All right, now you got me confused on that point. Tell me again.
We don't have to, we can pick someone who's from the ETJ, but we don't have to.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, okay.
Want me to start?
Please.
Thrilled that we had several of the candidates that were considered early in the spring to re-put their names forward, and new candidates as well. So I had a little bit more work on this pile. Lots of great deserving people. A couple of the candidates that we have other board opportunities coming up in the future that I thought would be great candidates for that board as well. So hopefully the folks will know to stay around. When I looked at the map, and last time I did the same thing, look at representation, I really felt like we needed to have representation north of Holly Springs Road. And the last Parks and Rec planning or workshop really helped me understand that I think one of the opportunities on this board is to have somebody with project management, looking at ROI and looking at number crunching, because that really was the opportunity I think that came up. So with that, I would like to put Jeff Palumbo as the name forward that I'd like to pick.
Okay, Tom?
Again, thank you for all the residents that applied as well as reapplied. This is a 6-month term, correct me again?
It is, right?
June, 6 or 7 months, and then there'll be, okay, another opportunity there. There'll be, I guess, a total of 3 seats available in the month of June. So again, this is kind of a short window for someone to come in. My recommendation, this person has worked with the University of Syracuse, as well as with the city of Syracuse, working with the NCAA. He's got an MBA, and I'm going to recommend Jeff Palumbo.
Okay. Next.
Yeah, as you two all said, thank you so much for the applicants and those who submitted before and new applicants. In looking at all these on this past week, I'm choosing Val Atkinson. I think he brings a very unique experience and outlook and to the Parks and Rec Board that is currently missing.
Okay. Thank you. Next, Sharon.
Yes, I'm also going to recommend Val Atkinson.
Okay.
Just from reading through, as Councilman Villadsen said, he does have a unique from what's on there now. Not necessarily 100%, in the Parks and Rec, but coming from almost a different thing. How do I say this? More of a wellness type background. So Val Atkinson is my recommendation.
Okay. Dan?
Thanks to everybody that applied. We had 10 people for one spot for 6 months, so this is a challenging appointment for just a handful of months. And all those that applied, I would encourage them to reapply in the next 6 months when we've got a number of maybe 3 more vacancies on this committee. I think there's a lot of qualified people. I came up with a short list, and I think my pick. I've decided to go with Val Atkinson as well. I think he has a background. It was quite interesting, the amount of things he's been a part of in the past, some of the advocacy groups, and a little bit different spin. It's not a direct Parks and Rec background that he has, but different advocacy and even in the health sector and public policy. But I think he's somebody that could add some value to our Parks and Rec committee for the next 6 months, so he's my choice.
So then the final vote's 3-2 for Val. Would you like to make the motion?
Sure.
Please.
Motion to appoint Val Atkinson to the Parks and Rec Committee with a term expiring, I think it's June 2019.
Yep. Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 9D, new business. Contract with Master Meter for AMI Fixed Network. Finance staff. There they are. You stuck it out, Patty. I'm proud of you. Yeah, exactly. I got you.
Oh, now for the vertically challenged. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Sears and Council, for allowing us to bring this presentation to you tonight. I do want to recognize Debbie Mann, who's in the audience with us. She is our meter services supervisor. She supervises the staff in the field as well as coordinates all our utility billing.
Now, is she new here?
Yes.
Debbie is probably the longest or second longest in town, maybe third max.
But we'll just
First?
say
Is it
Debbie's
first now?
employee number is 1, if that gives you any idea.
Anyway, you're terrific.
So,
Go, I'm sorry.
so thanks to Debbie. Also, I have with me Yolanta, and I would attempt to pronounce her last name, but I might not do it justice, so we're just going to say Yolanta M. She is our business analyst, and she helps us in the finance, utility billing, meter department with the processes and the technical aspects of what we attempt to do. So having said that, my boss said I could only have 5 minutes, so I think I might go over that, Randy, and I apologize just a little bit. Also, we do have representatives here from Master Meter. If you would have any specific questions that we might not be able to answer for you. Just to give you a little bit of background with this, we started this project approximately 3 years ago when it came to council. At that time, we still had walking routes. Our first initiative was to make everything so that we could drive in our vehicles and we didn't have staff have to physically get out and read meters. So we have accomplished that. After we took care of that, the next was to continue to upgrade the technology. A lot of the infrastructure that we have is aging, some of it as much as 20 years, and the warranties are beginning to wear. And as I've indicated to you in the past, as we age, we slow down a little bit. I'm not going to admit to that because I'm feeling pretty young, but also our infrastructure will do the same. So part of that is when we upgrade to this system, we should and will get more efficient reads and more real-time information for our residents, which is really the end result of where we're trying to get to provide the most accurate information so that our residents don't have to wait 30 days between billing cycles to figure out that they potentially could have a leak or something of that nature. And then, and on our side, that would be loss of water for the town, which is not really what we want to do either. We would like to be able to keep our natural resources as much as possible. So we've been, like I say, we've been doing that for about 3 years. I'm going to say we're about 80% have completed all the change-outs, so we do have a little bit more to go, but we are now ready to do what I call light it up, which is move to the a tower-ready type situation. Tonight, we're asking you to approve a contract with the cost estimate and scope of work that was attached in your agenda packets. And the funds for that have already been approved in this budget, so we're not asking for additional funding. This is funding that you approved with the fiscal year 18-19 budget.
It's in the budget now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is. And if this would move for me, that would be great. But it doesn't want to.
His left,
There we go. All right. So some of the initiatives here, it talks about water loss prevention and enhanced customer service. I'm going to let Yolanta speak to, it does come with an app, so I'm going to let her speak to that a little bit. I say we sort of covered this. So the steps now are to install what we call plug-and-play base stations on existing infrastructure. We would test the equipment and install additional what they would call repeaters that would give us more of a geographic area so that the signal encompasses all of town. We would test this during a 90-day period or 3 billing cycles. We're not going to roll this out 100%. As with anything, we're feeling really positive about it, but we want to roll it out in sections and see how it's working, and then we'll complete the other 20% that's not in the ground and, tweak any plan that we thought was working that potentially did not. So we would, our next step would be to install a new tower for a 4th base station. Right now, we're going to use our current infrastructure with the water tower and Avon Ferry to be the first. the water tower located at Holly Springs Elementary School to be the second, and then the third site would be the reclaim tower. So with that, I'm going to let Yolanta.
Thank you, Patty. Good evening. My name is Yolanta Milchanovsky.
Sure.
I got my N.
Like Patty mentioned, I'm a business analyst for finance department, and if Billy allows me to show you the app that we will eventually provide for our customers, which will tie to the system. Like Patty mentioned before that what we do right now, we read our water meters once a month, which obviously if you have a leak somewhere on your property, we're not able to detect that possibly for a couple of weeks, which brings us to refund that we have to issue to customers for the sewer portion. So therefore, we are losing, as a town, we're losing money, and the customer has to pay for their leak. Both sides are losing. With this system, we are able to detect leak pretty much on an hour, every hour, because the system will read the meters frequently, and it will be able to notify us and notify the customer that their consumption all of a sudden skyrocketed while they actually out of town on vacation or doing something else, which obviously gives us savings, gives customers savings. App will also provide real-time communication with the town, which will allow our customers to ask us questions, technical questions, questions about the bill, questions about pretty much any service that we provide for them, as well as it will alert customers on, let me put it this way, when you are on the budget and you don't want to go over the budget, you set yourself a limit on, let's say, water usage or anything else. The app will allow you to set that limit, and it will alert you if you are going over the limit, which is wonderful if you're on the budget, and most of us are, I hope, at least in finance department. Can we shoot that over, Billy? All right. I got the IP. I'm connecting. I'm getting an error.
While we're waiting, what about the water tower that's just
So,
behind my house?
And which one is
That's
close
on
to you,
Lee
Lee
St-
Street?
Lee Street.
So what we want to do, the equipment that Master Meter is going to put in, it's a small base station that will go somewhere in the middle, or not even in the middle, on the tower. It has to have certain elevation in order to reach all the repeaters that
Okay.
are going to be reading. And this will connect to all the water meters, which will bring all the data right into our system. So we don't have to have all the water meter technicians that we have right now driving around and reading the water meters once a month, every single route. And what this will do.
So it doesn't have to be on every water tower? Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
Okay.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
we plan on, in order to cover the entire town, we would like to put 4 base stations and sort of repeaters. When I say repeaters, are sort of like antennas.
Mhm.
So the signal comes from the meter through the repeater to the base station, sends the signal back, and then it comes back to us, to our software. And we get that within literally an hour or so.
So the coverage is there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I
think
And
that-
it's been already tested.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm thinking that the tower at Holly Springs Elementary School would cover the area that,
Okay.
where you are.
there it is.
But if, at least based upon our preliminary,
Okay.
investigation, but any any infrastructure like the Lee Street Tower is certainly something that we would look at because,
Right.
you know, if we already own it and
Right.
all that kind of stuff, then we
Okay,
put it there.
great.
So at this point in time, we're not seeing that Lee Street is needed. But-
Okay, great.
But, you know, as we keep adding things like Lowe's, we may need to.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, she's going to show
She's
the
gonna
app.
demo now.
On app, sorry?
If I may, I'm just going to take literally 30 seconds. This is the app that we will provide eventually to all the town customers and residents. We will start probably just with a few of us, whoever lives in town of Holly Springs, to test when we put the base station number 1 up and running. This will show everybody consumption, which you are able to see exactly how many gallons of water you use every single month. This will be the notifications. If you have a question, concern, you simply type a few words and send the message over to us and we will respond. And this will be the, if it's going to load, just the message center. And just a bunch of settings for everybody to customize what they want to use, what they want to see, what they want to set. But it's very simple to use. I think it will encourage new additions to a town of Holly Springs as long as the old, sort of speak, residents, because it's very intuitive. It's not very sophisticated, although I would say it's sophisticated but very user-friendly. And it will give us a huge benefit of predominantly detecting leaks and saving a ton of money for us as well as for the customers. And thank you so much.
So, and for those who aren't maybe tech-friendly, who don't have smartphones or have the app, the town would be able to see if there was a leak.
Yes,
notify
and we
them.
will be able to notify right away. So in opposed to what we do right now, when we do a drive-by, and let's say you live at 24 Main Street and your house, your water meter is being read today, but you had a leak 3 weeks ago, and you're losing gallons and gallons and gallons of water. We don't know that until today because we read your meter today. In opposed to this, we will know right away within an hour, and we can notify you that your consumption is way over the norm.
Good.
I
Great
just
idea.
want to add that currently we do monitor water consumption. We do get leak alerts, leak alarms, but we do investigate those because there is a few parameters that we study to make sure that it is a true leak. But and if we do notice it, we do leave door tags for customers on their doors. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't use their door because they go in through the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they're on vacation. But this app, like I said, would allow you, if you normally have, 4,000 gallons worth of use and you're out of town, you can set it for 0. And then if you notice you have use, then either your neighbor's borrowing or something has happened.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
How would
Great idea.
how would this work if you have like both irrigation and regular water? Do you tell consumption for each one?
Yes, this will actually read both. The irrigation meter will be read exactly the same way as a normal standard 3G house meter.
So one would see separate numbers for each?
Yes, they have a separate AMR numbers.
Like the idea. I got 2 calls this morning on the same subject. You can help me. Any other comments?
We can prevent those.
Yeah.
I think we budgeted like 1.6 million for this project overall. So I guess we could expect some more invoices or further work to come after this one?
Yeah, our initial request right now for you is really $168,000.
Right.
So yes, there'll be more to come, but this will get us started with the putting the equipment on the towers
tower.
that we need to light it up. Master meter and consolidated pipe and supply will both be very instrumental in helping us do that. We have, like I say, representatives from both here, and they're a great resource for us and definitely will help us through this process.
Okay.
Cool.
And if any of you are in the areas that we light up and you're interested in testing the app, we're more than happy to share that with you.
Sure.
Fabulous.
Teenagers. I love it.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, never thought about that, but okay.
Okay, ready for a
My
motion?
mom will use too much water.
Yeah.
I know.
think we need a motion.
I think, does it go to the next page?
There you go.
There we go. Sorry.
Thank you.
Motion to adopt Resolution 18-42, authorizing a sole source contract and to enter a contract with Master Meter for installation of tower reading equipment for utility meters.
Second.
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for hanging out
Thanks
all
for,
night.
yeah.
Yeah, thank
It's
Did
still
you bring the sleeping
Tuesday.
bags? Never mind. Agenda item 9E, new business, condemnation resolution 136 and 40A, New Hill Road widening. Counselor John Schifano.
Yes, sir, Mayor. As part of the stuff that's going on in that area, the Thales Academy, and the town is also instituting or installing a sidewalk from Target to the H.H. Hunt neighborhood and eventually 12 Oaks. And I've got a map of the parcel that we're talking about, but there is a very small parcel where the property owner cannot be located. We actually had to condemn part of this property in 2006 for the 12 Oaks water line, and they didn't respond then, and I don't expect that they've been revived from the grave since. So I think the property owner has long been gone. But we'll do a service of process by publication. So that's a 2/10 of an acre tract. What's left after we take the road widening and the sidewalk is what I'll determine a non-economic remainder. So we're gonna take the whole tract, and that will clean up some title issues over there too. So I just ask for you to pass that resolution of condemnation.
John, if you, with the public notice, if you find somebody, so we're not giving any money in exchange for the property, right?
It'd be $1 unless a property owner came
Okay.
forward.
And then we would,
And then it
Then
would
we
be a
discuss
fair
money.
market value.
Fair
We'd have to
market value, okay.
back down to fair market value. The tax value on this is almost nothing, and they haven't paid, nobody's paid taxes in the last 10 years on this property.
Okay.
So, and Wake County just won't go through their process of foreclosure. It's frankly easier for us to just condemn the whole thing
Okay.
than for them to foreclose.
Okay.
Good. Any other comments or questions? If not,
Motion to adopt Resolution 18-43 for the condemnation of the property indicated in the resolution.
Second.
motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Item number 10, other business. Because of respect for your time, I'm going to be brief again. First of all, the buttons are on the flashing crosswalk signs. The sign is there. I noticed today, I think one of the reasons why they're not using it, some of them don't even want to. They just go ahead. But I've seen the signs come on today more than once. Only one car has gone through the sign since I've been watching. And I couldn't catch up with them to find the license plate number. And last but not least, since the chief has been here all evening, I got an email from Rosemary Jardine Crompton. And it says, "Too often we complain about our police and forget they are wonderful men and women quietly doing their job. One of them is Officer Clark." And I think most of you people know Officer Clark. I know he is a first responder, and we know him. "I met him in Ace Hardware. I told him I would be alone during Florence. He took my name and address and continued to check on me. This is the reason I still live in Holly Springs at my age," whatever that is. I hope you can make share this email with his superiors and with him." Ta-da. Please pass that on. I think you did, too. I think I sent it to you. Thank you. Thank you, John. I'm done. Who else?
Real quick,
Other business?
I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure of representing our town at Habitat for Build
How was
on Saturday. I'm great at sighting, and I know, it was a great experience. Hopefully next time it'll work out for more folks to come out, but it was a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing if we can have some of these homes closer to us. So we have 3 in our town now, And one of the owners actually came out to support in Raleigh. So it was great. I look forward to doing it again.
Good. Anybody else?
It's something to think about, Billy, maybe we can pass it on, Jeff. Is there any way, this packet tonight was over 600 pages, and to try to get through it and to find where I don't know if there's some way to search or table of contents or something for these packets, but it's kind of tough. So if we can just think about maybe something that would help us to find, like, get past consent agenda. It's just getting a little crazy with these big packets, but just something to think about. Maybe.
We'll look at that, certainly.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I was going to say, I think you're going to mention that anyway tonight, correct?
The which piece?
About the reduction of some of the backup.
I hadn't planned to, but I think along with those lines, I would like to take a look at the whole agenda in total, and, are all the attachments needed?
Right.
Sometimes there's a lot of extra engineering drawings and detail, and if that's an area that that council's amenable to, I think we can scale back some of those additional attachments.
Not a criticism, it's a good idea.
Yep. Right.
Anything else?
I've got 3 items, quick items, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The first item, and many of you recall, a month ago, we had Hurricane Florence come through. And one of the things that, obviously, we were very fortunate here, but we know that many of our neighbors, the south and east of us, experienced some really difficult times, and they're still experiencing really difficult times. I'm really proud to say that I've been in consultation and contact with the Apex town manager, and we've both sent crews to some degree together down east to help out. And this week we have 1 public works crew, 5 of our colleagues, 3 trucks and a loader who are in the town of Riverbend, and very much helping out. And let me just show you just a little bit about, give you a sense for what they are experiencing. So this is a couple, 3 photos from this week. One example at a residence there of what's been gutted from the house. This you see, if you look along the roadway as it curves around, you can see all the piles that are out there in front of the home. So a lot of debris remaining. And then this truck on the left is a Holly Springs truck, and the truck right behind is a Town of Apex truck. So our crews are working alongside together, and a nice show of partnership and helping out our neighbors down east. So I wanted to point that out, and I also wanted to point out that our police department, I want to thank the chief. The Holly Springs Police Department has been helping out the town, or the city of New Bern. We've had 11 officers last week who went down and assisted, and they primarily focused on night patrols. I mean, as you can imagine, a lot of the officers down there and public safety personnel have been working 24/7, chance to let them have some sleep, and our officers have been covering those evening shifts. So a great job to the Holly Springs Police Department and Chief, thank you. And to Luncey as well on the public works crews. The second item I wanted to mention, we have a couple great events coming up. This weekend, we've got a fire prevention open house this Saturday at Station 1, and that will run from 10 to 2. So again, a fun activity for families and anybody who wants to come out, learn a little bit about fire prevention, and a great opportunity to interact with our firefighters. The third item is the Holly Fest. So we all are a great annual event for us, October 27th. And that will take place at Sugg Farm Park from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. A lot of activities going on, so hope everybody will come out. It'll be a great time for sure. So with that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Counselor, you don't dare.
Yeah, I know. We'd all be saying nay.
All right, may we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for sticking around.